Chapter 71. It was said that the emperor of Great Yin Dynasty, Yin Dan, had 100 sons and 1,000 grandchildren. The 100 sons of Emperor Yin were the clan leaders of 100 imperial clans of Great Yin Dynasty. Although Yin Buji was an unruly man, he was the lineal grandson of Yin Dan's 9th son, and also the lineal great-grandson of Yin Dan. He was the clan leader of the 9th clan of Great Yin Dynasty. Yin Jiuhui's ancestor was the son of a concubine of Yin Dan's 9th son. Therefore, the clan leader of the 9th clan of Great Yin Dynasty, Duke Yin Lu, was the one who managed the clan leader. After confirming the identity of Lu Qingfeng, naturally, he would take over the title of Duke Yin Lu, and the official position of Zhuguozheng, and the position of the clan leader of the 9th clan would naturally belong to Lu Qingfeng as well. In terms of seniority, Lu Qingfeng was the real ancestor of Yin Jiuhui and Yin Bugui. Yin Jiuhui was already over 100 years old, and he still didn't have the face to exchange pleasantries with Lu Qingfeng. After Yu Xian confirmed the identity of Lu Qingfeng, he began to handle all kinds of files and official documents for Lu Qingfeng, handing over all kinds of seals and medallions. Then Yin Jiuhui left with a long face. Yin Bugui was the real grandson of Lu Qingfeng. Yin Jiuhui could run away, but Yin Jiuhui had to stay here and serve him obediently. Not only today, Yin Jiuhui also told Yin Bugui that Lu Qingfeng didn't have any men he could use in Ji City. Therefore, he asked Yin Bugui to bring some men and serve Lu Qingfeng at his beck and call. After a busy night, they finally finished all the handing over procedures. With a shake of his body, Lu Qingfeng had become a member of Great Yin Dynasty's imperial clan. The Duke of Great Yin Dynasty, Duke Yin Lu Zhuguozheng, led by Yu Xian with great hospitality. All the hanger-ons brought by Lu Qingfeng moved into Duke Yin Li's mansion, which was left behind by Yin Buji. It was a luxurious mansion that was ranked in the top 30 in Ji City, occupying an area of 1,000 acres. By the time Lu Qingfeng had sorted out the few most pressing issues and gathered all the supervisors in Duke Yin Li's mansion, it was already noon. Last night's storm was like a nightmare, leaving no trace behind. Now that the sun was high in the sky, the hundreds of stewards standing in the courtyard of the Duke's mansion were sweating profusely. Draped in a gauze robe, Lu Qingfeng sat under the eaves, coldly looking at these stewards who wore respectful expressions. When the sun was so hot that the stewards almost fainted, Lu Qingfeng casually said, "Forget it. Just focus on your work in the future. Everything was done according to the old rules. I'm not an unreasonable master. As long as you're diligent and respectful, I won't pick a few unlucky bastards to kill for others to see." Wu Qi leaned against a pillar, looking at these stewards with a smile on his face. It was reasonable for Lu Qingfeng to allow them to suffer under the scorching sun. When a new master came to power, if he didn't give these people a little bit of suffering, there might be more messy things that would happen. By giving them a warning, it would make it easier for Lu Qingfeng to take over the huge inheritance left behind by Yin Buji in the future. Putting aside how much power Zhuguozheng had, just the 2 fiefs under Yin Buji's name. How much was the annual output of them? How many properties in these 2 fiefs belonged to Lu Qingfeng? How many people were needed to manage all these? Just by looking at the fact that there were over 400 stewards in the Duke's mansion, one could easily imagine how huge the property was. Tai Yuewu, together with a few personal serving ladies and the ferocious-looking Lan Xiazi, came walking towards Wu Qi with a big smile on her face. "Qingfeng, my son, this is your first time in Ji City, so you're not familiar with everything. I don't have any suitable candidates to handle all the affairs in the Duke's mansion. But I do have quite a number of smart and capable men here, who can help you share some of the burden." Tai Yuewu smiled, her eyes narrowed into 2 lines. Now that Lu Qingfeng had become the Duke of Great Yin, how much benefit could this bring to her mother's family? Wu Qi smiled, staring at Lu Qingfeng, waiting to see how he was going to answer this question. If he allowed those stewards brought by Tai Yuewu to meddle in the affairs of Duke Yin Li's mansion, perhaps after a period of time, Lu Qingfeng would have nothing to do with it. On the contrary, although Lu Qingfeng wasn't familiar with these stewards of Duke Yin Li's mansion, they were, after all, the servants of Yin Buji's family. They were more reliable and trustworthy. Lu Qingfeng stared at Tai Yuewu with a gloomy expression. After a long while, he breathed out a long sigh. Mother, you don't have to worry about these trivial affairs. Yen Fu, prepare something worth 3 million gold coins for Madam, and send her out of the mansion. As for those men brought by Madam, give them some gold and silver coins. No matter what, they have come to G City, we can't let them come back empty-handed. Among all the stewards in the courtyard, the white-bearded old man who stood at the front of the group of 4 old men hastily took a step forward and answered with the utmost respect. Tai Yuewu's face immediately turned dark green. She glared at Lu Qingfeng with a venomous look and cried out with a stern voice, "Qingfeng you!" Lu Qingfeng looked at Tai Yuewu with an indifferent expression and said with a soft voice, "No matter what, you're my mother. Therefore, I'll ensure the prosperity of Marquis Yuanyang's family. If Marquis Yuanyang wants to do something, just send someone to contact me at any time." "But Lu family has nothing to do with me." Tai Yuewu rolled her eyes. Suddenly, a smile that was as beautiful as a spring flower emerged on her dark face. "You little boy, why are you scaring your mother like this? Nothing to do with Lu family? Now I understand. Why don't I divorce Lu Wenrua when I return home?" Tai Yuewu had a bright smile on her face, but she was discreetly observing Lu Qingfeng's expression with extreme caution. After a brief moment of silence, Lu Qingfeng said with an indifferent tone, "I'll let mother handle this personally. How can I interfere in mother's matter?" Tai Yuewu remained silent for a while, then she asked carefully, "So mother, you'll leave Lu family when you return home? Mother, you'll come visit Qingfeng more often in the future?" Lu Qingfeng nodded his head slowly, smiled and said, "After all, mother is my birth mother. If I'm free, of course I'll visit you more often. But if it's not necessary, those people from Lu family of Liang should not show themselves in front of me." He paused for a brief moment, then Lu Qingfeng continued in a carefree manner. "It's not a bad thing if grandfather and a few uncles want to come to G City." The smile on Tai Yuewu's face grew thicker, and she answered with a clear voice. After pondering for a while, Lu Qingfeng waved his hand and asked all the stewards to leave the courtyard. After all the stewards had left, Lu Qingfeng said with a serious tone, "Once I've gained a firm foothold in G City, I'll ask a few uncles to send some men to G City. Tai family thrives on the army, so I'll try to get a batch of armors and weapons specially made in G City and send them back." Tai Yuewu smiled so widely that her eyes narrowed into 2 fine lines. She sat next to Lu Qingfeng in a warm and affectionate manner, stroking Lu Qingfeng's head. In all his life, ever since Lu Qingfeng was born, Tai Yuewu had never treated him so intimately. Although Lu Qingfeng had grown into an adult, his eyes still turned slightly red when he saw Tai Yuewu's action. On the other side, Wuxia twitched his mouth. If Lu Qingfeng's words were to spread out, perhaps the monarch of Lu Kingdom would be the first one to come to G City and argue with him. Tai family controlled nearly half of the military strength of Lu Kingdom, and yet, Lu Qingfeng still wanted to send the armors and weapons specially made by Great Yin Dynasty to Tai family. What was the meaning of this? Obviously, Lu Qingfeng was telling Tai Yuewu that if his grandfather and a few uncles wanted to rebel, they could just slaughter the entire family of the monarch of Lu Kingdom. After all, there was still a huge grudge between Lu Qingfeng, Princess Yingchuan, and Lord Puyang. It was better to settle this score as soon as possible. Breathing out a long sigh, Lu Qingfeng gave his last order. "Mother, I think you better go back quickly. Break off the relationship with Lu family as soon as possible. As for mother's reward, I'll ask Duke Yuxian to announce it to everyone after you settle the matter there." Just like what was mentioned before, after Lu Qingfeng inherited the title of Duke Yanlu as his birth mother, Tai Yuewu would also receive a new title, becoming one of the most influential ladies in Great Yin Dynasty. But without a doubt, when Tai Yuewu was still the matriarch of Lu family, Lu Qingfeng would never allow her to receive a new title, the rights and benefits that came with it. Wuxia found it funny. Although Lu Wenrua had diligently sent the mountain-shattering cavalry to escort Lu Qingfeng all the way, Lu Qingfeng did not appreciate his kindness at all. When Tai Yuewu insisted on cutting off all relations with Lu family of Liang was destined to decline. In those years, Lu family had pushed Lu Qingfeng too far, and now, it was no wonder that Lu Qingfeng had to repay them in such a way. After chatting with Tai Yuewu for a long time, Tai Yuewu finally left the Duke mansion contentedly. Lu Qingfeng would use all his strength to retaliate against Lu family of Liang, but he would never be able to cut off all relations with his mother and his mother's clan. On the contrary, he had to use all his strength to cultivate the power of his mother's clan. If not, he would be a rootless tree in Ji City, and without any help, how could he have a stable foothold? After sending off Tai Yuewu, Lu Qingfeng turned to look at Wu Qi helplessly. You've heard what mother said just now. I don't have anyone in my hands now. Although those stewards are the servants of Duke Yanle, I still need someone to keep an eye on them. Wu Qi, tell me, what should I do? Looking at Wu Qi, Lu Qingfeng's eyes were filled with fatigue and helplessness. He only had a few hanger-ons around him, and those hanger-ons who came from Little Meng City were experts in murder and arson. If he asked them to help him manage the government affairs and finances, in less than 3 months, Lu Qingfeng would be completely ruined. Wu Qi stared at Lu Qingfeng, raised up a finger and said, "Young master has promised me. I do want to join an immortal sect." Lu Qingfeng stared at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, "Help me with all your strength for half a year, let me have a stable foothold in Ji City. Then I'll recommend you to join an immortal sect in Great Yen." After listening to what he said, Lu Qingfeng quickly said, "Even if you join an immortal sect, you will still be the chief hanger-on of the Duke Mansion. You can't just throw your hands away like this." Regarding Wu Qi's ability, Lu Qingfeng had always been relying on him. He was really afraid that Wu Qi would just devote himself to cultivating immortality and ignore him, his old master. After getting the promise from Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi also promised that he would always give him advice, and wouldn't devote himself to cultivating immortality. Both of them had a frank discussion about this problem, and at last Wu Qi gave Lu Qingfeng a suggestion. Lu Qingfeng's foundation was too shallow, and he didn't have anyone he could trust and use. However, he still had many good friends in the Lu Kingdom. These good friends of Lu Qingfeng had given Lu Qingfeng a great help when he was plotting against Yan. They were the sons of concubines or illegitimate sons from some influential clans in the Lu Kingdom. Although they had received the education that the sons of influential clans should have, and possessed a certain level of ability, their status in their clans was as awkward as Lu Qingfeng's. These men were the best helpers for Lu Qingfeng at the moment. Summon them to Ji City, and ask them to help young master with all kinds of affairs. They do have the ability to do so. Young master, promise them that after 3 to 5 years, when young master has trained some capable men, you'll help them seize the power of their clans. With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi gave Lu Qingfeng his final suggestion. With this, young master will be able to solve your urgent problem. Those young masters will also have some connections in Ji City, and after they have gone through all kinds of training, they will be of great use. When they return to the Lu Kingdom, young master will help them seize the power of their clans. With that, young master will have a strong support in all the vassal kingdoms. Upon hearing Wu Qi's suggestion, Lu Qingfeng couldn't help but let out a wild cheer, and nearly jumped up from his seat. Chapter 72. After sending off Tai Yuewu, who was burning with impatience, and wanted to return to the Lu Kingdom, Wu Qi and his company had just returned from the outskirts of Ji City. They immediately saw a large group of scouting officers men gathering outside Duke Yanli's mansion, moving a large pile of clothes, quilts, and other miscellaneous items from a few coaches. The chief steward of the Duke's mansion, Yan Fu, stood blankly in front of the door, watching these men of scouting office moving things in and out. He didn't show any intention of stopping them. Not only Yan Fu, all the other servants of the Duke's mansion were staying far away from them, not daring to come close to these men of scouting office. Lu Qingfeng knitted his brows into a tight frown. He walked out from the coach and asked with a loud voice, "Yan Fu, what is going on here?" Before Yan Fu arrived, Yan Bugui had already come out from nowhere. He bowed respectfully at Lu Qingfeng and said, "Clan leader, it's my grandfather who asked me to stay by your side temporarily and listen to your orders. That's why I've brought 300 of my subordinates to stay here temporarily." Wu Qi was taken aback. Yan Bugui staying by Lu Qingfeng's side temporarily and listen to his orders? This was what Yan Jiuhui had told him 2 nights ago. But judging from the current situation, there was something wrong with the situation. Why did he need to bring 300 men here to move? He turned his head and looked at those servants standing before the entrance of the Duke's mansion. Suddenly, Wuxia realized what was wrong since yesterday. Lord Yan, do you know why there are only these stewards and servants in our young master's mansion? Where are those guards? Lu Chengfeng was suddenly enlightened. Duke Yan Li's mansion was the mansion of a duke. With Yan Buji's title and official position, it was not a big deal for him to keep a few thousand hanger-ons and have over 10,000 personal guards in his mansion. But now, in this Duke Yan Li's mansion, besides all the stewards and servants, not a single hanger-on and personal guard of Yan Buji was seen. This was just too ridiculous. Although the monkeys would scatter when the tree falls, Duke Yan Li's mansion had yet to fall, and there was still Lu Chengfeng, the heir to the duke's mansion. Even if those hanger-ons had gone to other places, those personal guards, especially the personal guards raised by Duke Yan Li's mansion for generations, should still stay in the mansion. Yan Fu. Lu Chengfeng roared at the steward, who was trying to approach them, but dared not. Yan Bugui turned around and looked at Yan Fu. He lowered his voice and sighed. Sovereign, please don't blame Yan Fu. These stewards and housekeepers are the servants of the Duke's mansion. To put it bluntly, Duke Buji's so-called drowning in the river is just a rumor to the public. In fact, Duke Buji was thrown into the river by someone, and his heart was pierced by a sharp sword. Even his soul was destroyed by someone using a magical item. Lu Qingfeng's expression changed instantly, and Wu Qi instinctively felt his hair standing up. It seemed like he had once again been dragged into a huge trouble. All of a sudden, Yan Buji. Tian. Obviously, Yan Buji was assassinated, and all kinds of clues showed that someone in Duke Yan Li's mansion was colluding with the assassin. This incident had even alerted Emperor Yan Dan, who had been in secluded cultivation all year round. He had personally issued an imperial decree, ordering scouting office and other special agents of Great Yan Dynasty to investigate this incident. Therefore, all the hanger-ons and personal guards of Duke Yan Li's mansion had been thrown into prison for investigation. As a result, the spacious Duke's mansion did not have any defensive force. Because of this, Yan Jiuhui found a random excuse to let Yan Bugui stay by Lu Qingfeng's side and listen to his commands. Firstly, he asked Yan Bugui to use the force of scouting office to protect Lu Qingfeng, and secondly, he asked Lu Qingfeng to be the bait. It is not uncommon for members of Great Yan Imperial clan to be killed in an accident, and there are at least dozens of cases every year. After all, the total number of members of Great Yan Imperial clan is over 1 million, and any accident could happen. But for a direct descendant of His Majesty to be assassinated, and it was someone who was close to Duke Buji, and a Duke of Great Yan Dynasty, this is something that has never happened before. Yan Bugui stared at Lu Qingfeng, who had his face turned dark with rage. With a bitter smile on his face he said, "Therefore, we have to get to the bottom of this case." Lu Qingfeng had a gloomy face and didn't say anything. No matter who it was, when anyone knew that they had stepped into a huge whirlpool, they would not be in a good mood. On the other side, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh helplessly. He crooked his finger at Zhao Qinzui, calling him over and said, "In the future, no matter where young master goes, I want everyone to stand guard. Get all the men of Meng village to wear heavy armors and protect young master day and night." Zhao Qinzui's face turned solemn. He answered hastily, then hastily entered the mansion and summoned Meng Xiaobai and the others. Now that Lu Qingfeng was a Duke of Great Yan Dynasty, all the glory and wealth of the people were placed on Lu Qingfeng's shoulders. Therefore, Zhao Qinzui had no choice but to be extra careful. Luo Kadi and Ma Liang came over hastily as well. Without saying anything, they stood on both sides of Lu Qingfeng. Their eyes were gleaming brightly as they glanced around vigilantly. Yan Bugui shook his head and said, "During the day no one dares to stir up any trouble in Ji City. During the night, as long as sect leader deploys the formation, and with the scouting office keeping a close watch on this place, nothing will go wrong. For the time being, sect leader, just don't leave Ji City too often." Lu Qingfeng knitted his brows and pondered for a while, but in the end, he nodded his head helplessly. In Ji City, there were only a few people he was familiar with, and he had yet to get in touch with those influential nobles of Great Yan Dynasty. Everything had just begun. The current Lu Qingfeng could only passively accept these storms, and he had no power to fight back. Wu Qi turned his head and gave the surroundings a glance. Suddenly, he recalled those city guards who had expanded Little Meng City. He pondered for a brief moment, then waved his hand at Zhang Hu and Hu Wei, giving them some orders. Sending soldiers from Little Meng City to Ji City was a helpless choice. At least, the soldiers from Little Meng City wouldn't have any conflict with the soldiers from Ji City. After busying himself for a while, Yan Fu had arranged a place for the men of scouting office that was close to the small building where Lu Qingfeng lived. Before he could sit down and catch his breath, Yan Fu came running into the room with a trembling body. Carefully, he handed over a visiting card, which was made from golden threads and embroidered with faint bamboo leaf patterns using silver threads, and emanating an air of wealth and honor, to Lu Qingfeng. Master, Prince Xi, Yan Helua has come to pay a visit. Yan Fu's face was filled with shock. Yan Bugui, who was sitting aside and drinking tea, sprung up immediately and cried out. What? Prince Xi has come to pay a visit? Sect leader, I have to see him. Prince Xi, Yan Helua, was one of the 8 princes who governed the state affairs of Great Yan Dynasty. The emperor of Great Yan Dynasty, Yan Dan, was in a secluded cultivation all year round. Chief General Jing Ku and all the other important ministers of Great Yan Dynasty didn't show themselves easily. They were all in a secluded cultivation, trying their best to make a breakthrough in their current realm, seeking for a stronger power and a longer life. The first generation of their descendants, the generation of Yan Dan's sons and daughters, had also been living in seclusion. They were either cultivating or doing other things, and none of them were involved in the state affairs. Yan Dan's grandsons, the generation of Yu Xian, only had 3 to 5 of them who were passionate about seeking power and enjoying life. They were in charge of the imperial family court, a noble and prestigious department. Although they held a high position, they didn't have much power and were only used as a supervisor. The ones who were really in charge of the real power of Great Yan Dynasty were the 8 great-grandsons of Yan Dan. They were given the title of prince, and were known as the 8 princes of Great Yan Dynasty. Prince Ren, Prince Yi, Prince Li, Prince Xian, Prince Zhong, Prince Xiao, Prince Min, and Prince Ci. These 8 princes formed the real core of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial court. Prince Ci Yan Helua was the youngest among them. Although he was Yan Dan's great-grandson, he was only in his 50s, still in the prime of his life. Yan Buji and Yan Helua were cousins. When Lu Qingfeng saw Yan Helua, he had to obediently call him uncle. In terms of the title of nobility, the title of the 8 princes was even higher than Yu Xian, who controlled the imperial family court. Even though Lu Qingfeng had inherited the title of Duke Yanlu and the official position of Zhuguozheng, when facing Prince Ci, no matter it was his seniority, title, or actual power, he had no choice but to bow his head and obey his orders. Please come in. Lu Qingfeng rose to his feet, brought his men, and walked out of the main entrance. The main entrance of Duke Yanli's mansion was opened. Wu Qi followed behind Lu Qingfeng and strode into the main entrance. He immediately saw a group of elite armored soldiers standing in front of the entrance, escorting a strange beast. It had a pale yellow body, looked like a horse, but had scales all over its body, a pair of spiral-shaped horns growing out of its head, and a pair of golden gleams shooting out from its eyes. This was a rare beast, the 1,000 miles golden eyes cloud. Once it lost its temper, it could run 30,000 miles in one day and one night, and it could run at an incredible speed in a short distance. It was one of the best mounts under the heaven. The pair of horns on its head were extremely hard and sharp, comparable to a precious blade that could slice through iron like mud. Riding on the back of the golden eyes cloud, Yan Helua looked like a man in his 30s. His face was fair and beardless, and his cheeks were slightly longer. He was emanating a faint air of dignity that could make one feel suffocated. When he opened his eyes and looked at someone, his gaze was sharp, as if he could see through their internal organs. Judging from the faintly discernible aura emanating from him, he was an expert of Xiantian realm, at least in the breath condensation tier of Xiantian realm. Upon seeing Yan Helua, Lu Qingfeng hastily bowed and said, "I didn't know Prince Ci was coming. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." Yan Helua leaped off the mount, supported Lu Qingfeng with one hand and said, You don't have to be so courteous. I have a very close relationship with Buji. I heard that you've inherited his title of nobility and official position. That's why I came here to have a look. Yen Halua helped Lu Qingfeng up, gave Lu Qingfeng a glance, nodded his head and praised. You look like a talented man. Good, you're a descendant of Yen clan. Your cultivation base is stronger than your father. If he had the cultivation base you have today, he wouldn't have passed away so suddenly. As a son, Lu Qingfeng found it inappropriate to answer Yen Halua's words. Instead, he put on a sad expression and respectfully invited Yen Halua into Duke Yen Li's mansion. The few hundred armored guards brought by Yen Halua followed him into the mansion, surrounding the front and back of the main hall. Upon seeing this scene, Wuxia couldn't help but twitch his lips. Was this Yen Halua afraid of death or something? His armored guards had entered the main hall just like that, not giving any face to Lu Qingfeng at all. He was a senior, one of the 8 princes who governed the imperial court. How could he not give face to his master? Shaking his head, Wuxia followed them into the main hall. Yen Bugui was bowing to Yen Halua. Yen Halua gave Yen Bugui a sideways glance, snorted lightly and signaled him to stand up. Yen Bugui was just the son of a concubine, and his seniority was far lower than Yen Halua's. By snorting lightly, Yen Halua had already given Yen Bugui a great face. Yen Bugui rose to his feet obediently and stood aside, narrowing his eyes and staring at those armored guards standing outside the main hall. Yen Halua and Lu Qingfeng sat down as the guest and the host. When the serving maids served them tea, Yen Halua began to talk. Qingfeng, congratulations on inheriting the title of nobility from my brother Buji. The reason I came here today is to discuss something with you. Not allowing Lu Qingfeng to open his mouth, Yen Halua continued in an indifferent tone. In your fief, there are 7 iron mountains and 5 iron smelting workshops. I'll use 5 fish farms, 3 pearl farms, and 4 jade mines in the East Sea in exchange for these iron mountains and iron smelting workshops. You can handle the handover documents tomorrow. Using natural fish farms, pearl farms, and 4 jade mines that produce luxury goods in exchange for 7 iron mountains and 5 iron smelting workshops? Before Lu Qingfeng could say anything, Wuqia had already interrupted with a smile. May I ask, Prince Ci, why are you doing this? Yen Halua raised his head and glared at Wuqia, sneered and said, Who are you? How dare you interrupt? Someone, drag him out and give him 300 strokes of the rod. Immediately, a group of armored guards rushed in like wolves and tigers. Chapter 73. These armored soldiers brought by Yen Halua were all elites selected from among thousands. Among the dozens of men who leaped toward Wuqia, each of them had a cultivation base of peak stage Hotian realm. 2 of them even had energy ripples emanating from their bodies. Obviously, they were just one step away from breaking through the realm of Xiantian. It seemed they were experts in some kind of combo combat technique. A dozen of them leaped toward Wuqia from all directions, grabbing his neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, ribs, knees, and all the major vital points of his body were under the clutches of their huge hands. Wuqia was caught unprepared. The fact that Yen Halua openly captured someone in Lu Qingfeng's mansion was beyond everyone's expectation. To put it simply, he didn't take Wuqia seriously. To put it simply, he was disregarding Lu Qingfeng's identity. To put it simply, he was provoking all the members of the 9th clan of Great Yen Imperial Clan with the surname Yen. No one expected that Yen Halua would give such an order. Therefore, Wuqia was pinned down by these armored soldiers. Dozens of burly men shouted at the same time, exerting force with their arms, trying to push Wuqia to the ground. Behind him, 4 armored soldiers were seen running towards him, each carrying a black stick as thick as a small bowl. Once Wuqia was pinned to the ground, they would immediately give him a good lesson. Although these 4 black sticks looked ordinary, they were actually made from 10,000 years old mountain vines. The vines were picked from the depth of the mountain, chopped down, soaked in tung oil for 3 years, then exposed to the sun, soaked again, and exposed to the sun again. After a total of 18 years, the original bucket-thick vine was shrunk to the size of a small bowl. Only then could the stick be considered a success. Although it was made from mountain vines, its weight was comparable to steel. When the stick smashed down, It carried a soft yet strong force, and could even smash a large rock into pieces. For ordinary people, they couldn't even withstand 3 strikes, let alone 300. Obviously, Yanhulua wanted to beat Wuxia to death by giving him 300 strikes. Wuxia was also at a disadvantage. He didn't expect that Yanhulua wouldn't put Lu Qingfeng, his master, in his eyes. Dozens of peak Hotian armored soldiers exerted their strength together. Wuxia staggered under the pressure, and his body fell to the ground uncontrollably. As soon as he fell to the ground, other than the 4 soldiers who had grabbed onto his shoulders and ribs, the other soldiers had let go of him. The 4 armored soldiers behind him raised their heavy black lacquered clubs, exhaled, and then smashed them down on Wuqi's buttocks and legs. The 4 of them used all their strength. The black lacquered staff pierced through the air, emitting a muffled whistling sound as it landed heavily on Wuqi's buttocks. The huge impact caused Wuqi's body to tremble, and the huge force passed through his body and directly hit the ground. The 4 dark cyan old mountain stone tiles under Wuqi's body were crushed on the spot. Wuqi felt a sharp pain piercing into his heart. The clothes on his buttocks were smashed to pieces, and a thick bloody mark suddenly appeared on his flesh. Although he had raised his internal energy to protect his body in time, this strike had nearly shattered all the internal energy in his body. The first armored soldier who swung the black lacquered staff took 2 steps back, while the other 3 followed a steady rhythm, swinging their clubs one after another. These 4 armored soldiers were experts in beating people's buttocks. Once they started, the black lacquered staff would fall down like a windmill, without any delay. Hearing another wind-breaking sound, Wuqi was greatly alarmed. The strike just now had nearly shattered his defensive energy, and his skin and flesh had suffered a serious injury. If he were hit a few more times, he would lose his life right here and now. Throwing his head back and letting out a shrill cry, Wuqi's eyes suddenly turned red. The enormous innate water energy hidden in the water meridians in both of his arms was activated, rushing straight into his 8 special meridians, and 12 standard meridians like the water of the Yellow River breaking through a dam. A visible cloud of misty water vapor sprayed out from Wuqi's body. The 4 armored soldiers who were holding his body let out a muffled snort, as if their index fingers were hit by a bomb at close range. An irresistible force came through their fingers, causing their flesh and blood to fly in all directions, and their pale white bones to break one after another. Letting out a furious roar, Wuqi's short hair stood up one by one. He gathered the power of the jade-breaking palm with his left hand, and secretly cast the star-picking palm with his right hand. His body twisted and leaped up like a crazy poisonous python. Along with a muffled sound of water waves, Wuqi thrust out his left hand, hitting one of the 4 armored soldiers who were holding him in the chest. The extremely condensed and soft palm force smashed into their bodies, exploding in the deepest part of their bodies. Only those who had witnessed the current situation of these 4 armored soldiers knew what it meant by flesh and blood flying in all directions. Only those who witnessed the current situation of these 4 armored soldiers knew what it meant by flesh and blood flying in all directions. In just a blink of an eye, their bodies exploded and shattered into pieces. Countless amounts of blood and meat paste squeezed out from the gaps between their armors, shooting out over 100 feet away along with ear-piercing hissing noises. The hall where Lu Qingfeng was entertaining guests had suddenly turned into a sheet of blood red. Before the 3 wooden poles could fall down, Wuqi spun around like a whirlwind, slapping heavily on the chests of the 4 armored soldiers with the jade-breaking palm, while silently striking out his right hand with the star-picking palm, lightly pressing on the vital parts of their dantian. The blood and chi essence of these 4 armored soldiers rushed into Wuqi's body. His buttocks, which were swollen and bruised after being hit by a wooden pole just now, were replenished by this blood and chi essence, healing the wounds at an incredible speed. The blood and chi in Wuqi's body surged and surged, filling his entire body with strength. He let out a long and sonorous cry, glaring at Yanhulua with a pair of blood-red eyes. "Since you want to kill me, I'll kill you." Wuqi cried out fiercely, raising both palms and slashing down towards Yanhulua's head. Bang! 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 For muffled booms rang out. The bodies of the 4 armored soldiers holding the black wooden poles trembled, as the frightening jade-breaking force exploded in their bodies. Just like the previous 4 armored soldiers, Their bodies exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood, spraying out from the gaps between their armors. A rain of blood poured down from the hall, drenching everyone in the hall. The sky was filled with blood and flesh. With his eyes bloodshot, Wuxia looked like a devil that had just come from the hell of blood, screaming and leaping towards Yanhaluo. Poor Yanhaluo. As one of the 8 princes of Great Yan Dynasty, he was extremely wealthy and honorable. As a man who had lived a comfortable life, he had never seen a brutal man like Wuxia, who had fought his way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Although he had the cultivation of breath condensation tier of Xiantian realm, at this moment, Yanhaluo was like a delicate teenage girl who was facing 70 to 80 lectures alone. His body was shivering, and he kept retreating backward crazily. While fleeing in a panic, he cried out with a stern voice, "Somebody! Somebody! Kill this maniac! Kill him now!" The few armored soldiers who had captured Wuxia just now were standing right in the hall, and they were the closest to Wuxia. Witnessing how Wuxia had used an unimaginable method to kill 8 of their companions, and even dashed towards their master, Prince Ci, Yanhaluo, the few armored soldiers were scared out of their wits. Almost instinctively, they huddled together and dashed towards Wuxia. As they were scared out of their wits, they didn't use any techniques or strategies, and just slammed into Wuxia with brute force. They didn't seek to kill Wuxia, they just wanted to stall Wuxia for a short moment, so that Yanhaluo could have the chance to escape, and so that the real experts around Yanhaluo could come to his rescue. They stretched out their arms, circulating their innate energies in their bodies over and over again, exerting their strongest force and leaping towards Wuxia while howling. Right after Wuxia sprung up 10 feet into the air, and when he was less than 20 feet away, these desperate armored soldiers suddenly dashed towards him, huddled together and wrapped their arms around Wuxia. "Go to hell!" The red gleam in Wuqia's eyes grew stronger, and a strong blood-red gleam almost burst out from his eye sockets. He took out the innate water serpent pill and placed it in his mouth. An enormous amount of water elemental energies kept rushing into his body from the pill, replenishing his innate energies that had been greatly depleted. The biggest feature of Scroll of Stealing was that it allowed one to consume innate energies without any scruples, and replenish innate energies at the same time, without any scruples. This was exactly in line with the characteristics of robbers and thieves. Since they had stolen something, naturally, they would be extravagant and wasteful. Which robber or thief would be so frugal? How could they have the intention of spending money for every grain of rice? Except for Scroll of Stealing, which was a heaven-defying cultivation technique. If any other cultivator dared to do this, their body would have long exploded from the enormous amount of energy contained in the innate water serpent pill. This was the limitation of the cultivation technique. Except for Wuxia, no one in this world dared to do this. At this moment, Wuqia's body had turned into a bridge. The enormous amount of energy from the innate water serpent pill kept bursting out from his body, giving him nearly all the power of the 3,800 years old innate water serpent in an instant. Waves of water that could be seen with naked eyes emerged around Wuxia, slapping onto the few armored soldiers with a loud boom. Right when these armored soldiers hugged Wuxia, the water waves, which were pure and without any impurities, rushed into their bodies. Their bodies were instantly shattered, as every single cell in their body was exploded by the swelling body fluid. The water waves that were coiling around Wuqia's body suddenly turned blood red. All the blood and chi essence in the bodies of these 8 armored soldiers were sucked out by him. If it were Wuxia, he could only steal 1% of the blood and chi essence in these armored soldiers. However, with the help of the innate water serpent pill, the great hand of Web and little star picking palm, and the frightening cultivation of the innate water serpent, he could easily suck out all the blood and chi essence in these armored soldiers, including all their Picotian innate energies. Blood waves were rolling and rolling around him. With a stern voice, Wuxia cried out, "Yanhaluo, die!" Pointing his left hand at Yanhaluo from a distance, Wuxia suddenly shot out countless blood-red threads from his palm. An ear-piercing whistling noise rang out, as the blood waves around Wuxia were rocking and rolling, transforming into a huge blood-red whirlpool. The surrounding air was driven by this blood-red whirlpool, turning into tens of tornadoes, each as thick as the mouth of a bowl. Yen Helua's fleeing body came to a halt abruptly, as the invisible force of the great hand of web had already enveloped him. He could not control his body and was being dragged toward Wuxia. What scared Yen Helu even more was that the energy and chi essence in his body were about to fly away, as if they were about to rush out from his pores and join the blood waves around Wuxia. Seeing that Yen Helua was about to be killed by Wuxia, two vague figures suddenly teleported in front of Yen Helua. "How dare you be so rude to Prince Ci? Die now!" Two vague figures shouted out at the same time. They waved their hands and unleashed two 7 to 8 feet long sword beams, thrusting whistling towards Wuxia along with a cold breeze. One of the two sword beams was yellow, while the other was gray. The quality of these two sword beams was not very high. Obviously, they were just ordinary flying swords. However, the cultivation of these two men was not weak at all. They had the cultivation of embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, compared to Old Devil and Lord Flame, who relied on evil techniques to increase their cultivation level. These two were embryonic breath level Xiantian realm cultivators who had trained themselves to reach their current level. When their sword beams were unleashed, the blood-red whirlpool unleashed from Wuqi's palm was immediately shattered into pieces. Laughing hideously, Wuqi narrowed his eyes and cried out harshly, "Let's see who's going to die." Raising his left arm, Wuqi gathered all his innate water energy on it, and took the initiative to thrust his left arm towards the two sword beams. The sword beams streaked across, and in an instant, blood sprayed out from Wuqi's left arm. Chapter 74. The shrill sword cry shook everyone's ears and brought them a sharp pain. The dark green glazed tiles on the roof were pierced by the shrill sword cry, breaking into hundreds of pieces on the spot. On Wuqi's left arm that was raised high up in the air, two short swords, each about 4 inches long, were deeply embedded in his flesh. They were twisting and struggling, but no matter how hard they tried, they just could not break free from the restraint of Wuqi's body. Although he only had the cultivation of Meridian cultivating tier, the scroll of stealing that Wuqi was cultivating was too powerful. Stealing the blood and chi essence of others to strengthen his own body, stealing the cultivation base of others to improve his own cultivation base, stealing the soul fragments of others to strengthen his own soul. Everything was so unimaginably queer. Therefore, although his cultivation base was at the Meridian cultivating tier, his overall strength could not be measured in this way. After being nourished by the blood and chi essence of so many people, his body was now a few times stronger than an ordinary Meridian cultivating tier warrior. The toughness of his muscles and bones was almost comparable to a physique cultivating tier warrior. The density of his innate energy was not any weaker than a breath-condensing tier warrior. With such a strong body and powerful innate energy gathered together, Wuqi injected all his innate water energy into his left arm. Immediately, his left arm looked like it was forged from diamond. Although the flying swords of the two embryonic breath tier cultivators were very sharp, when they were clamped by Wuqi's flesh, they could only let out shrill cries, and could not break free from the restraint of Wuqi's arm no matter how hard they struggled. The two embryonic breath tier cultivators stared blankly at the two flying swords embedded in Wuqi's arm, completely dumbfounded. Although their flying swords were not of a high grade, they were still sharp weapons of mid-grade magical item. Wherever the sword beam passed through, even an ordinary iron armor would be sliced in half. How could a man with flesh and blood restrain flying swords? This was a sensational story. Could it be that he was a human immortal who had attained mastery in Jin Dan? Both cultivators looked at each other in shock. Chi-Chi breathed out a mouthful of innate energy, performed a sword incantation gesture, and cried out, "Go!" The two flying swords vibrated violently together, constantly emitting sharp sword cries. Blood burst out from the wound on Wuqi's arm, which was pierced by the flying swords, and dripped onto the ground, which was now badly mutilated. With a hideous smile on his face, Wuqi leaped towards the two cultivators. The innate water energy was spinning rapidly in the meridians of his left arm, producing deep and muffled sounds of water ripples. Two invisible whirlpools formed on his left arm, and at the core of the whirlpools were two flying swords embedded in his arms. A huge suction force firmly trapped the two flying swords. No matter how fast they struggled, they could not escape from Wuqi's grasp. Not only that, as the saying goes, dripping water can wear away a stone. Wuqi's innate water energy kept eroding and wearing away at the flying sword, wiping away the spiritual mark left behind by the two cultivators, and the thread of innate energy that controlled the flying sword. The strength of Wuqi's soul was far stronger than the two embryonic breath-level cultivators. Although it was 1 against 2, it still made the two cultivators feel more and more uncomfortable in controlling the flying swords. Obviously, these two cultivators were orthodox Qi practitioners. They had put all their energy into polishing their innate energy, refining their flying swords, and practicing magic and talismans. Orthodox Qi practitioners like them only focused on cultivation. Although they had a solid foundation and a superb cultivation base, they lacked the ability to adapt to situations. Seeing that the flying swords had no effect, the two cultivators breathed out mouthfuls of innate energy and kept urging the flying swords to detach from Wuqi's body, so that the sword beam could cut off Wuqi's head. They had forgotten that the distance between them and Wuqi was only a few feet. Even a warrior at the peak of the Hotian realm could cross this distance in just 1 step. With a hideous grin on his face, Wuqi extracted a large amount of natural energy from the innate water serpent pill, instantly turning it into rolling natural energy and spreading it into his meridians. The blood and Qi essence of the 7 or 8 armored warriors were absorbed into his body, condensing into 2 explosive balls of jade-shattering palm energy on his right palm and right knee. Like a tiger, he pounced in front of the two cultivators and pressed his palm on the chest of the man on the left. Then he lifted his right knee and thrust it into the lower part of the cultivator's kidney with all his strength. The natural energy extracted from the innate water serpent pill and the blood and Qi essence of the 7 or 8 armored warriors were divided into 2 equal parts. After that, Qi blasted them into the bodies of the two cultivators. Suddenly, the bodies of the two cultivators swelled up. After entering the embryonic breath level, all the spirit, Qi, and spirit of a cultivator would be contained inside his body. His appearance would be as old as it could be, and as shriveled and ugly as it could be. However, after being forcefully blasted by the natural energy and blood and Qi essence of Wuqi, the shriveled skin of the two cultivators suddenly turned white and shiny, swelling up like a silkworm that had eaten too much. Damn it! 2 miserable howls rang out. Countless finger-sized cracks appeared on the surface of the bodies of the 2 embryonic breath-level cultivators of Xiantian realm. The jade-shattering energy kept exploding inside their bodies, and all the people inside and outside the hall could hear the deep, muffled explosions coming out from their bodies. Streams of blood kept bursting out from their 7 apertures, and their breaths were weakening at an incredible rate. Die. Wuqi's eyes went wide as he gave a loud roar at both men. The storage bag moved, and 2 poisonous prickles from Ming Mountains were grabbed in Wuqi's hand. Then he ruthlessly stabbed them between the eyebrows of the 2 cultivators. Another huge wave of energy from the innate water serpent pill penetrated into the brains of the 2 cultivators through the prickles, shattering their spiritual ocean and soul into countless pieces under the impact of the energy. The great hand of web was unleashed through the poisonous prickles, and a tremendous suction force was sent out from the prickles. Both cultivators had spent over 100 years of arduous cultivation to reach the embryonic breath level of Xiantian realm, and their powerful and condensed souls were comparable to the combination of 100 souls of ordinary people. When such a huge soul was shattered into pieces, it was extracted by the mystic technique of scroll of stealing, turning into pure soul particles and injecting into Wuqi's spiritual ocean. In Wuqi's spiritual ocean, the water ripples of 1,000 miles in circumference began to spin crazily. The soul particles were washed over and over again by the water ripples, and the traces of aura from the 2 cultivators were completely washed away. The pure soul energy transformed into a 7-colored ray and squeezed out from the water ripples, turning into a sheet of 7-colored mist that hovered slowly in Wuqi's spiritual ocean. At the moment, Wuqi did not have the ability to digest and absorb the 2 enormous soul energies. He could only temporarily store them in his spiritual ocean, and slowly absorb and fuse them in the future. The soul was the most important foundation for a cultivator. The stronger the soul was, the stronger the divine will and divine sense would be, and it would not be easy for the cultivator to be invaded by the external evils during the cultivation, and it would not be easy for the cultivator to make mistakes during the cultivation. As long as he could absorb all the soul energies from these two cultivators, it would be much easier for Wuxia to break through to the Jin Dan realm in the future. Although it seemed like a long time ago, in fact, everything happened in just a few seconds. Two cultivators of embryonic breath level of Xiantian realm were brutally killed. A huge amount of dark blood burst out from their bodies, and in just a blink of an eye, they had turned into two pitch-black meatballs the size of a child. After that, the jade-breaking force exploded, and the two pitch-black meatballs exploded. Countless poisonous blood and flesh splattered in all directions, scaring all the people in and out of the hall into a flurry. Laughing hideously, Wuxia pulled out the two middle-grade magical flying swords from his left arm and shoved them into the storage bag. The innate water energy was flowing back and forth in his arm, constantly nourishing the wounds and healing the blood vessels and nerves quickly. However, not only did these two flying swords injure Wuxia's muscles and nerves, they had also pierced through the bones of his left arm, damaging the bone marrow inside. This was a very serious injury to Wuxia's foundation of cultivation. If it were any other cultivator who had their bone marrow damaged, they would have to consume all kinds of spirit medicines and spend a few months to carefully nurse their body back to health. But for Wuxia, although the injury was serious, as long as he could steal the blood and chi essence of a few people to fill his body, he would be able to recover in 3 to 5 days. There was still a little bit of blood and chi essence left in his body. Without hesitation, Wuxia gathered them near the wounds. Wave after wave of scorching hot streams rushed to the wounds on the bones, and at a speed that Wuxia could sense, the bones and marrow began to heal and regenerate. Initially, Yanhelua thought that his two personal guards would be able to kill Wuxia with ease. When he saw two sword beams piercing through the air, a cold and complacent smile emerged on his face as he struggled to his feet. Before he could regain his balance, Wuxia had wounded himself in the most violent and barbaric way, then killed the two strongest embryonic breath realm cultivators who served Yanhelua. Yanhelua was about to throw his head back and laugh out loud complacently, but his body suddenly trembled. His laughter was suddenly stuck in his throat, and turned into a strange clucking sound that sounded like a hen that had just laid eggs. He stared at Wuxia while shivering, as he couldn't figure out why Wuxia, who had just reached meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm, was able to kill the two strongest personal guards of him. You somebody. Yanhelua pointed his finger at Wuxia, but in the end he could only let out a long and shrill cry. Outside the hall, the armored guards brought by Yanhelua had already rushed into the hall. However, as the bodies of two cultivators exploded, sending countless dark poisonous blood and flesh flying in all directions, they had no choice but to scatter in all directions. At this moment, Yanhelua let out a wild cry, and all of them pulled out their swords, charging towards Wuxia like a tidal wave. Clang! A sword cry rang out, as a soft sword came swaying towards Yanhelua. Like a poisonous snake, it coiled 3 rounds around Yanhelua's neck. The quality of the soft sword was very good, as it was a sharp weapon meticulously crafted by an expert craftsman. The razor-sharp edge of the sword was pressed against Yanhelua's neck, and a bone-piercing cold air nearly froze his body, silencing his shrill and unpleasant cry. Lu Chengfeng held the hilt of the sword steadily, his fingers not moving at all. He stuck close to Yanhelua's back, then shouted with a cold and merciless voice, "Prince Ci, not only is Wuxia my chief hanger-on, he is also my sworn brother. I'm sorry, but if you want to kill him, I'll kill you instead." Yanhelua cried out as if he had just seen a ghost. "Duke Yanlu, have you gone mad? Do you know the consequences of killing me?" With a ferocious voice, Lu Chengfeng said, "So what if I kill you? At the worst, I'll just wander around the world. As long as I still have my sworn brothers and friends, where can't I make a name for myself? You came to my house and forcefully demanded my Iron Mountain smelting factory. That is no different from humiliating me. You also killed my sworn brother, my chief hanger-on. You didn't give me any face, so what if I kill you?" Holding the sword with his right hand, Lu Chengfeng reached out his left hand and lightly patted on Yanhelua's cheek. Lu Chengfeng, who had always been gentle and elegant, and had the air of a young master from an influential clan, was now like a wild wolf that was forced into a desperate situation, bringing with him a ferocious and murderous aura, which was exactly the same as Wuxi's. Yanhulua, can you tell me, is your neck made of flesh and blood? Can this soft sword chop off your big head? Wuxi coughed out a mouthful of blood, then gave Lu Qingfeng a thumbs up with a strange laugh and said, "Hee, aren't you forcing me to never leave you behind for the rest of my life? Hee, you are indeed a good brother." None of the armored soldiers who rushed into the hall dared to move. While laughing wildly, Wuqi came before Yanhulua, swung his hand and gave him a tight slap on the face. The slap nearly knocked Yanhulua's teeth out. Yanhulua's neck tilted to one side, and the edge of the sword tightened its grip. A large piece of the white skin on his neck was cut open, and blood immediately flowed out from the wound. Yanhulua and Yanbugue cried out at the same time, "Stop! We can discuss this." Chapter 75. Lu Qingfeng smiled, a very bright smile. He gave Wuqi a look filled with deep emotions, then pushed the tip of the sword slightly into Yanhulua's flesh. A stream of blood slowly slid down from Yanhulua's skin, and his face, which had just recovered a little bit, turned unsightly again. He just wanted to give Lu Qingfeng a show of strength by beating his hanger-on to death, so that Lu Qingfeng would listen to him obediently. Wasn't it normal for him, Prince Ci, to beat a few men to death? Why would Wu Qi have such an intense reaction? Why would Lu Qingfeng attack him, one of the 8 princes who supervised the state affairs, just for a mere hanger-on? Prince Ci laughed and said, "Surrender to the barbarians? They will never trust you." Wu Qi looked at Yanhulua with a smile on his face. Suddenly, he thrust the dagger in his hand into Yanhulua's thigh. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi nodded at Yanhulua. Then he forcefully poked a few times on Yanhulua's body with his finger, cutting off all the meridians in his body, and sealing off all the innate energy in his body. The heaven-shadowing finger of this meridian-breaking restrictive spell came from Scroll of Stealing, and was a profound and magical technique. Not only could it be used on human beings, it could also be used on demon beasts, spirit beasts, or even legendary immortal beasts and divine beasts. Wu Qi sat down on the low couch opposite Yanhulua, crossed his legs, and narrowed his eyes as he sized up Yanhulua, whose face had turned deathly pale. Yanbugue had temporarily taken on the role of a servant. He picked up a copper kettle placed on top of a small stove in a corner of the inner hall, brewed a pot of tea, and poured a cup of hot tea for each of the people present. Before Yanhulua could say anything, Wu Qi sprung up and sat right next to Yanhulua in a friendly manner. Hugging Yanhulua's shoulder, he said smilingly, "Why don't we do this? You can use the most vicious oath of your soul to swear a blood oath. As long as you have the slightest thought or action towards our young master, or anyone close to our young master, you will die without a burial place. After you die, you will be divided and eaten by millions of animals. Your soul will never be able to reincarnate, and your line of descendants will be cut off. Even the members of your clan will die a horrible death. What do you think?" Just as they left the mansion, Yanhulua gritted his teeth and ordered, "Execute concubine Oriole, and beat her brother to death." Yan Fu, who was frightened by the tragic turn of events, but still maintained the bearing and demeanor of a butler of the Duke's mansion, walked in and led the soldiers out of the hall as if they were ducks being chased away. Now that Yanhulua was under someone's control, no matter how unwilling these armored soldiers were, they had no choice but to follow Yan Fu out of the hall. After that, Yanbugue nimbly leaped over and closed the door. Wu Qi smiled and said, "You don't have the intention to become enemies with our young master, but you have ordered me to be beaten to death." He casually clapped his hands, wiping away the blood staining his hands. Then he took out an outer robe from his storage bag and put it on, covering the torn back part of his shirt and trousers. With a relaxed and joyful smile on his face, the blood gleam in Wu Qi's eyes was quickly retracted. Indifferently, he waved his hand at those armored soldiers, who had their bodies tensed up and their nerves were on the verge of breaking. Yanhulua stared at Wu Qi as if he had just seen a ghost, while Lu Qingfeng and Yanbugue had their faces turned extremely strange. Did they really have to make such a scene? With Yanhulua's status and identity, not to mention exchanging the few iron mountains with the fishery, pearl quarry and jade mine. Even if he asked for them for free, how many people in Great Yin Dynasty would dare to not give him face? Even if it was that stingy Yu Xian, if he, Yin Helua, wanted to get a few mineral veins from him, Yu Xian would at most ask for an equivalent exchange. The inner hall was a small compartment with luxurious furnishings. Everything was exquisite and luxurious. 2 incense burners shaped like the heaven-swallowing toad were emitting a faint purple aroma. The rich fragrance of lilies filled the air, washing away the smell of blood that came from the front hall. Lu Qingfeng pressed Yen Helua down on a low couch and sat down. Then he himself sat right next to Yen Helua. If you don't swear, I will assume that your highness, Prince Ci, will seek revenge from us in the future. If that is the case, no wonder you can't walk out of Duke Yanli's mansion today. Lu Qingfeng was just a duke who had just arrived in Ji City, without any foundation or power. He was just a duke with an undeserved reputation. Yen Helua had given him a great honor by personally exchanging his properties with him. How did things turn out like this? With a complicated look in his eyes, Yen Helua gazed at Wuxia, and nearly cursed it out loud. Holding the dagger, Wuxia forcefully twisted and turned a few rounds in Yen Helua's thigh muscles, causing him to scream out in pain. Wuxia hated the fact that his cultivation base was not strong enough. If he had the cultivation of Jindan realm, he would be able to seize Yen Helua's nascent divinity, and swear an oath with his nascent divinity. This would be the safest way. But now he could only be careful and take precautions, and hope that Yen Helua's oath would have a binding effect on him. 15 minutes later, Yen Helua, who had changed his clothes, left Duke Yanli's mansion with an extremely unsightly face. Wuxia sneered and said, I've told them. We'll use your head to pave the way. Will they believe the head of one of the 8 princes of Great Yin Dynasty? Or we can just bring you alive and seek refuge with the barbarians. With your testimony, they should believe us, right? Yen Helua gazed at Yen Bugui, then said with a bitter voice, This time, it was my new concubine who begged me. Her elder brother had his eyes on the 7 iron mountains and 5 iron smelting workshops in Duke Yanli's fief. That's why he begged me, using the few fish farms, pearl farms, and jade mines to exchange for them. But I never expected that I would suffer such a great hardship. Holding the teacup with both hands and fiddling with the lid, Wuxia gazed at Yen Helua from the corner of his eyes, sneered and said, Tell me, your highness Prince Ci, why did you come to our young master's mansion? It seems like you're here to bully us. If we're talking about the title of nobility, you're a prince. If we're talking about the seniority, you're a senior. If we're talking about the power, you're one of the 8 princes of Great Yin Dynasty. Is it really necessary for you to make such a scene just for a few iron mountains? Wuxia gave Yen Bugui a look. Without saying a word, Yen Bugui spun and left the inner hall. Not long after that, he could clearly sense the ripples of wood element energies coming from the outside, along with the faint howls of wind-breaking wolves. After a while, Yen Bugui returned to the inner hall. He had already sent his subordinates to inform the scouting office about what happened here. Lu Qingfeng squeezed out a smile, slowly sheathed the flexible sword, grabbed Yen Helua and walked into the inner hall. The flexible sword that was coiled around Yen Helua's neck a moment ago had been kept back into his sleeve by Lu Qingfeng. His right hand was pressed tightly against Yen Helua's ribs, and the tip of the sword had pierced through Yen Helua's clothes, nearly piercing through his skin. As long as there was a slight change, Lu Qingfeng would just have to unleash his innate energy, and the flexible sword would pierce straight into Yen Helua's heart from the ribs. Hee. Suddenly, Wuqi's joyful laughter rang out in the hall, which was filled with a tense atmosphere. Yen Helua couldn't help but let out a bitter smile and said, I shouldn't have come here. Why did I have to do this? I've lost so many of my trusted soldiers, and even 2 sinecures that I've recruited with great difficulty. Really, why did I have to come here? From the bag, Wuxia took out a small sharp dagger, placed the teacup on the low couch, and began trimming his nails in an unhurried manner. I, Wuxia, am not a talented man. Although I am the chief hanger-on of our young master, we are like brothers. You're trying to kill me in front of our young master. This is not giving our young master any face. Since you're not giving our young master any face, why should I give you any? Yen Helua let out a bitter laugh, sighed and said, Why did you have to do this? I don't have the intention to become enemies with Duke Yanlu. Left with no other choice, Yanhulua could only repeat what Wuqi said, word by word, swearing the extremely vicious oath. There were cultivators in this world, and the theory of ghosts and deities was prevalent. After swearing such a vicious oath, Yanhulua wouldn't dare to attack Wuqi and Lu Qingfeng again. Standing at the entrance of Duke Yanli's mansion, Wuqi was sneering as he listened to Yanhulua's order. In an indifferent tone, Wuqi asked, "What is the background of the new concubine of Prince Ci?" The elder brother of the new concubine of Yanhulua had his eyes set on the properties in Lu Qingfeng's fief. A large stream of blood was oozing out from his neck, and the clothes on his upper body were stained with blood. Trembling, Yanhulua picked up the teacup, and regardless of how hot the tea was, he tilted his head back and drank the entire cup in one gulp. He breathed out a long sigh of relief. The scalding hot tea seemed to have brought a little bit of heat to him, and the flush on his face gradually returned to his cheeks. Wuqi clapped his hands, gave Yan Bugui a smile, and slowly walked into the hall. Yan Bugui breathed out a long sigh, frowned and looked at the mess of blood and flesh on the floor, then shook his head helplessly. He stomped his feet, rolled his eyes a few times, and hastily followed Yan Bugui into the inner hall. Yanhulua was flustered and exasperated. If not because the edge of the sword was pressing against his ribs, he would have leaped up and cursed out loud. Prince Ci's expression changed instantly. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. He finally knew that Wuqi was a fugitive, a real fugitive. It was not strange for him to do anything. If Wuqi really brought Yanhulua's head to the barbarians, those barbarians would definitely welcome them with great joy. Even if they did not go to the barbarians, Great Yan Dynasty had a vast territory, and there were so many vassal kingdoms. After Wuqi and his men killed Yanhulua, as long as they escaped from Ji City, they would be able to find shelter anywhere. Wuqi sighed, shook his head and said, "If we killed Prince Ci, one of the 8 princes, we just need to bring his head and escape to the territory controlled by those barbarians. I think we will be able to live a good life there. The women of the barbarians are very beautiful, and the way they eat and drink is not any worse than the women of Great Yan Dynasty. When we are bored, we can just bring a few barbarians out of the forest and kill some people, seize some territories, and live a carefree life." Wuqi looked at Yanhulua, who was covered with bloodstains. He pondered for a long while, then breathed out a long sigh and said, "You are, after all, a prince of Great Yan Dynasty. We don't dare to kill you. But we don't dare to let you go just like that. It is too troublesome for one of the 8 princes to find trouble with our young master. What are you doing? What are you doing? Our young master is a relative of Prince Ci, and Prince Ci is also our young master's elder. What is the purpose of you, a group of outsiders, being an eyesore when an elder is chatting with a junior? Yen Fu, give each of them a gold ingot, and send them out to enjoy good wine and meat." Yan Bugui snorted coldly, cupped his fist and bowed to Yanhulua, then said with a deep voice, "Who is Prince Ci here to negotiate with Duke Yanlu?" Yanhulua was struck dumb. His face twitched, then he said with a cold voice, "She is the daughter of Prince Fuling of Xian Kingdom." Xian Kingdom? Didn't the hostage of Xian Kingdom die tragically 2 nights ago because of Duke Yanlu? So, I'm being used as a weapon by someone? How dare they? Wuqi and Yan Bugui exchanged a glance. Both of them twitched their lips at the same time, revealing a cold, thoughtful smile. Chapter 76. After Prince Ci, Yanhulua, was sent away, the following half a month of peace and tranquility, and nothing else happened. Under the guidance of Yan Fu and Yan Bugui, Lu Qingfeng began to visit the important figures in Ji City in an orderly manner. The clan leaders of various imperial clans, the heads of a few influential clans, the prime ministers and 9 ministers, and many high ministers and ministers. During the half a month of time, Lu Qingfeng barely managed to straighten out all these relationships, and became familiar with all the influential figures in Ji City. However, Lu Qingfeng still had a long way to go before he could truly enter the core circle of nobles of Great Yan Dynasty, possess the relationship and power network that a duke should have, and truly grasp the power and authority of Zhuguozheng. It would take a long time for him to succeed. Fortunately, the influential members of the 9th clan of Great Yin Dynasty, whose clan master was Duke Yin Li's bloodline, had taken the initiative to join them. Led by Yin Jiuhui, the members of the 9th clan of Great Yin Dynasty, there were military officers, ministers of the imperial court, and some high-ranking members of scouting office. With their bloodline as the bond, several dozens of influential figures had taken the initiative to gather around Lu Chengfeng. Finally, he had a force that he could use. For the past half a month, Wuxia had been so busy that he kept slapping his buttocks with his heels. Together with Yen Jiuhui and the other capable men, he focused on checking the accounts of Duke Yen Lu, as well as the money and goods stored in the treasury. With that, he had roughly sorted out the general affairs of the 9th clan. Through this check, Wuxia and Lu Chengfeng learned that the two fiefs of Duke Yen Lu were not only the hereditary fiefs of Lu Chengfeng, but also the public assets of many branch clans of the 9th clan. 60% of the annual output of the fiefs would be distributed by Lu Chengfeng to the influential members of the 9th clan. Some members of the imperial clan who had no official position in the imperial court were living off this money. Meanwhile, the 40% of the income left behind by Lu Chengfeng would not be solely enjoyed by him. If one of the members of the 9th sect encountered a calamity, or had a headache or fever, and needed a lot of money to help, Lu Chengfeng, as the new sect lord, would have to pull some money out of his own pocket to help the members of the 9th sect solve their problems. Since the establishment of Great Yin Dynasty over 2,000 years ago, Lu Chengfeng was the only direct descendant of the 9th clan, while there were over 8,000 members of the Yen clan who were born by concubines. The total number of personal guards, servants, and serving ladies of these clan members was over 400,000. Among these 8,000 members of the Yen clan, there were only a few hundred elite members like Yen Jiuhui and Bugui, and Yen Bugui and Yen clan members. After spending half a month to Yen clan Jiuhui, Yen and Bugui, Yen Wu and Yen Zhuang they and Yen and Bun, Yen and Endiz. Initially, both of them thought they had picked up a great bargain, but now, they realized that they had actually found themselves a great trouble. Holding a cup of tea in his hand, Lu Chengfeng sat on the stairs in the main hall of the Duke mansion with his legs crossed. While sipping the tea, he said with a sigh, "I thought after inheriting the throne, I would be able to enjoy a life of luxury and happiness. Little did I know, there are so many troubles waiting for me." Wuxia sat next to him, also crossing his legs and sighing. "That's right, the hostage of Xian Kingdom, the son of the monarch of a kingdom, was killed by us. Prince Ci, Yen Helua, was covered in blood by us. The chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard, Qin Qingshui, seems to be hostile to us. There are over 8,000 members of the 9th clan, and we have to handle countless affairs, including life, death, sickness, and old age. Why bother?" Shaking his head, Lu Chengfeng said with a deep voice, "Never mind, since we are already here, let's just take things as they come. We still need to send some capable men to keep an eye on Little Meng City, as the annual production there is not a small amount. I've already communicated with my mother, and from now on, the Three Mountains province, where Little Meng City is located, will be my private territory." Wuxia frowned and said with a soft voice, "Put it aside for now. Little Meng City won't be in any trouble for the time being. When young master has more men, we'll send some of our trusted men there. We need to mobilize the soldiers from there as soon as possible, or else, young master won't have enough guards. Young master's father was assassinated, and we still haven't found out the exact reason. Young master's safety can't be neglected." While chatting with each other, they gradually sorted out the recent events, and made a rough plan for their future development. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for now. As long as those friends of Lu Chengfeng who came from the influential clans of Lu Kingdom came to Ji City, he would have a batch of men he could use as his subordinates, and the current troubles would be solved. As he had no men he could use, Lu Chengfeng had to write the visiting cards himself when he went out to visit those nobles from the imperial court. This was just too unreasonable. While they were having a heated conversation, Yen Fu, with his head lowered, dashed into the room with a clear palm print on his face. He bowed respectfully to Lu Chengfeng, then said with a bitter voice, "Master, someone is visiting from outside the mansion." He looks menacing, and it doesn't look easy to deal with him. Please be careful, master. Casually throwing the teacup to Lao He, who was standing right next to him, Lu Qingfeng rose to his feet angrily and shouted, "Who is this rude guy? Since he has come to visit, why did he slap you?" Yan Fu was a servant of Duke Yan Li's mansion, and he had been serving as the chief steward of Duke Yan Li's mansion for nearly 100 years. When Lu Qingfeng first came to Ji City, he was still a little worried about Yan Fu and the other old stewards. However, after a period of observation, especially after Yan Jiuhui used the power of scouting office to cooperate with the investigation, he found out that the loyalty of Yan Fu and the other stewards of Duke Yan Li's mansion was absolutely impeccable. For these loyal and reliable old men in the mansion, Lu Qingfeng had been relying more and more on them. But now, Yan Fu was slapped by someone. This was not a slap to Yan Fu, but a slap to Lu Qingfeng's face. Yan Fu let out a bitter laugh, lowered his voice and said, "Master, you have to be careful. The visitor is very arrogant, as if she is here to cause trouble. The people following her are all imperial guards of the scouting office." Apart from the East, South, West, and Central Wind Guards, there was another independent department in scouting office, the Palace Guards. All the people in this Palace Guards were elites selected from 10,000, and they were responsible for protecting the important members of the imperial clan. Normally, the Palace Guards would only appear around the members of the lineal clan of Great Yan Dynasty. The so-called lineal clan of Great Yan Dynasty was the lineal clan of Emperor Yandan's eldest son, the Crown Prince of Great Yan Dynasty. The Palace Guards were responsible for protecting the Crown Prince of Yandan, the Crown Prince's son, the Crown Prince's eldest son, as well as the lineal clan of the Crown Prince. According to the rule of Great Yan Dynasty, the Palace Guards were responsible for protecting the lineal clan of the future Crown Prince of Great Yan Dynasty. Upon learning that the man who slapped Yan Fu was followed by the Palace Guards, Lu Qingfeng's face turned a little unsightly. Yet Wu Qi sneered and said, "Someone from the lineal clan? So what? Yan Fu, did he tell you his name and background?" Yan Fu bowed his head and said carefully, "Mr. Wu Qi, that man is a very fierce man. He slapped me and a few of my children the moment he saw me. He said he wanted Master to welcome him personally, but he didn't tell us his name and background. However, no one has the guts to impersonate the Palace Guard serving her." Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng exchanged a glance. Lu Qingfeng snorted coldly and asked Xiaohe to gather a group of guards. Together with Yan Bugui, who had rushed here after hearing the news, they quickly walked towards the entrance of the Duke Mansion. They went around a few pavilions and walked past the big courtyard behind the mansion. When they came to the screen wall behind the main entrance, they heard a soft and tender voice of a lady coming from outside the door. "Your Duke Yanlu is too arrogant. It has been so long, and he still hasn't come out to welcome the guest. Are you looking down on me?" A crystal-clear sound of slapping was heard, as if someone was slapped again. Lu Qingfeng's expression changed again. He quickened his pace and dashed out of the mansion with just a few steps. Outside the entrance of Duke Yan Li's mansion, nearly 100 palace guards, clad in dark green soft armors, were escorting a luxurious four-wheeled coach. 12 gatekeepers of Duke Yan Li's mansion were kneeling down at the bottom of the stairs in front of the entrance, and were being slapped by 2 teenage girls who looked like serving ladies. The dozens of guards standing before the entrance of the Duke mansion wanted to step forward and stop them, but they were stopped by those palace guards. Both sides were at daggers drawn, and a fight could break out at any time. "Stand back!" Lu Qingfeng shouted out lightly. The dozens of palace guards quickly took a few steps back. However, those palace guards were insatiable. With a faint smile on their faces, they strode forward and chased after these palace guards, all the way up the stairs in front of the Duke mansion. Wu Qi snorted coldly and stamped his feet forcefully. Meng Xiaobai, who was following closely behind Lu Qingfeng, let out a loud shout. Together with a few guards from Meng village, they lifted up their iron spears and dashed forward. The iron spear, which had the diameter of a small bowl, was thrust forward, bringing up a swooshing sound of wind and forcing the dozens of palace guards who had just stepped onto the stairs back down. 2 serving ladies, who had their eyes narrowed into a thin line and were slapping the gatekeepers, cried out in shock. They hastily ran to the side of the coach, looked at the direction of the coach and murmured something under their breath. Yo, it's so difficult to meet Duke Yanlu. The soft and delicate voice of a lady came out from the coach. Wuxia knitted his brows. The voice of the lady sounded very familiar. It sounded exactly the same as the voice of the lady who released the demon ghost and clashed with Wuxia on the night when Lu Qingfeng was attacked half a month ago. Lu Qingfeng snorted and strode down the stairs. He pulled up those gatekeepers, whose faces were badly beaten, and shouted coldly, "Yan Fu, give each of them 10 ingots of silver as a reward, and let them have a good rest for 1 month." Yan Fu answered. He glared fiercely at the coach, then hastily ordered those gatekeepers to retreat into the mansion. The gatekeepers of Duke Yanli's mansion were the sons of servants in the mansion, and they had been serving as servants for generations. Yan Fu had always treated these people as his own children. Today they were slapped by someone for no apparent reason, and it made him feel both heartache and anger. 10 ingots of silver? Duke Yanli's mansion is indeed rich. The lady in the coach sneered and said, "If that's the case, I won't be courteous with you. Duke Yanlu can reward a few lowly gatekeepers with 10 ingots of silver. Many of my personal guards have been killed by your hanger-on, and my personal demon ghost guards have been severely wounded as well. Duke Yanlu, you have to compensate me with 5 million gold coins." 5 million gold coins? Lu Qingfeng and Wu Qi were taken aback. The total annual expenditure of hundreds of thousands of city guards in Ji City, including armaments, armors, and other military supplies, was less than 1 million gold coins. Asking for 5 million gold coins as compensation? That was not the way to demand an exorbitant price. Wu Qi sneered and said, "Who are you? Please come out and talk to me." The lady sneered and said, Do you think I'm afraid of you? Come out and talk to me, then come out and talk to me. I'm here to denounce you. If you don't give me an explanation today, I'll make sure you won't be able to move a single step in Ji City." Suddenly, the door on one side of the coach opened up, and a slim figure walked out slowly. Chapter 77. Autumn water as divine jade as bones, just like a fairy walking on ripples entering the mortal world. The lady who walked out from the coach was the most beautiful lady Wu Qi had ever seen since he arrived in this world. Even the barbarian girl who had merged with the innate water serpent in the depths of Meng Mountains was not as beautiful as this young lady. She was so beautiful that it could shake one's soul. If there was a source of calamity in this world, then it should be this young lady. Wu Qi was not surprised that he used the word tragic to describe her. If not for the fact that she was born in a prestigious family and was protected by the palace guards, Wu Qi had no doubt that with her beauty that could topple a state, she and the people around her would only end up with a miserable fate that could only be described as tragic. The young lady was not tall. She was about 1.75 meters tall, which could only be considered as an average height in this world. However, her posture was perfect to the point of being impeccable. She was graceful, and every move she made seemed to affect the surrounding environment. There was a gentle glow emitting from her body. When she walked out from the coach, the surrounding air was lit up. A gentle breeze blew past, and a refreshing fragrance came wafting into Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi could smell it clearly. It was not the fragrance of incense, nor was it the fragrance found in other sachets, but the natural fragrance of this young lady. Even though he was 20 to 30 feet away from Wu Qi, he could still smell the natural fragrance that felt like the condensation of the essence of 100 flowers. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat, and all he could do was to scream in his mind. This was a girl who was truly a monster. The young lady had a head of long black hair, which was coiled into 3 buns, decorated with a few exquisite flower ornaments. Amidst her luxurious appearance, there was a hint of playfulness that could only be found in young girls. She had a pretty face that was exquisite and impeccable, and her rosy lips were twitching disdainfully. Amidst her nobility, there was a hint of naughtiness, a hint of unruliness, and a hint of barbarism. A luxurious palace dress of dark green had wrapped around the slender and beautiful body of the young lady, making her curvaceous body look even more enchanting. The style of palace dress in Great Yin Dynasty was conservative and traditional. Normally, even the neck of a lady would be tightly wrapped, And this young lady's palace dress was obviously specially made. Not only was her slender and fair neck completely exposed, even her chest was in the style of a Tang dynasty noble lady's dress, revealing a large area of white, tender, and flawless flesh. She was of noble birth, pampered, mischievous, unruly, and rebellious. Wuxia saw through this girl's nature with a single glance. Yan Bugui and all the other scouting officers knelt down in front of the young lady. Your subjects greet Princess Zhang Lu. Yan Bugui, who was kneeling on the ground, raised his head slightly, his hands grabbing onto Lu Chengfeng and Wuqi's clothes, pulling hard, signaling them to kneel down and pay their respects. Princess Zhang Lu, the youngest daughter of Emperor Yandan's eldest son, Yan Qijuan. 18 years ago, Yan Qijuan, who was in a secluded cultivation, made a breakthrough, and his Jin Dan attained the mastery stage, stepping into the realm of peak stage human immortal. Overjoyed, Yan Qijuan held a banquet to celebrate, and when he was drunk, he forced himself on a barbarian beauty, who was presented to him by a vassal kingdom. As a human immortal of mastery realm, Jin Dan had a stable meridian, and its energy would not leak easily. But that night, Yan Qijuan was too excited, and he was drunk. As a result, he accidentally gave birth to the barbarian beauty, and she became pregnant. After 3 years of pregnancy, the barbarian beauty gave birth to a baby, who was the current Princess Zhang Lu. Meanwhile, the barbarian beauty had consumed too much of her energy during the 3 years of pregnancy, and after giving birth to Zhang Lu, her blood essence dried up and she died. A barbarian beauty, who was presented to the crown prince of Great Yan Dynasty by a vassal kingdom, was a peerless beauty that could only be seen once in a million people. Princess Zhang Lu had inherited her mother's peerless beauty, and she was even more beautiful than her mother. Ever since she was young, she was given the title of the #1 beauty in Great Yan Dynasty. On top of that, Yan Qijuan lost his energy in Jin Dan's mastery realm, and that was the reason why he had Princess Zhang Lu. Jin Dan was a human immortal of mastery realm, and even a tiny bit of energy was no trivial matter. Princess Zhang Lu was born with this tiny bit of energy essence, and when she was born, her meridians were all cleared, and she had the cultivation base of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. She was a rare genius in cultivation, and her bone structure was unparalleled. With such beauty, such innate talent, and the fact that she was the direct granddaughter of Emperor Yandan, when Princess Zhang Lu was born, she was granted 100 cities as her fief by Yandan himself. After that, every year on her birthday, she would be granted more fief. Half a year ago, when Princess Zhang Lu was on her 15th birthday, she had accumulated 3 fief provinces, and they were the 3 richest and most densely populated provinces in Great Yan Dynasty. Not to mention the others, the elite army of these 3 provinces alone had a total of 150 battalions, and a total of 75,000 soldiers. On top of that, these 3 provinces were located right next to Ji City, and the elite army of these 3 provinces were all cavalries. With just an order from Princess Zhang Lu, 75,000 elite cavalries could arrive at Ji City at any time. 3 years ago, there was once an ignorant son of an aristocratic family from a vassal kingdom, who blocked the way of Princess Zhang Lu on the street. As a result, Princess Zhang Lu deployed 30,000 soldiers and marched into Ji City, massacring all the properties of that aristocratic family in Ji City. More than 3,000 people were killed on the street. After that, the punishment that Princess Zhang Lu received was nothing more than being grounded for 3 days, and Yandan personally fined her half a month's worth of taxes from her fief. After that, Princess Zhang Lu had become the devil incarnate that no one dared to offend in Ji City. Even the 8 princes who were responsible for managing the state affairs of Great Yan Dynasty didn't dare to offend her. Even the title of Princess Zhang Lu was given to her by Yandan after she took a fancy to Zhanglu Palace, the place where Yandan used to have his secluded cultivation. After that, she forcefully snatched Zhanglu Palace, which occupied an area of a few hundred miles, from Yandan's hands. Great Yan Dynasty had been founded for over 2,000 years, and Yandan had been living in seclusion in Zhanglu Palace for over 1,700 years. Every single grass and every single tree in that place was personally planted and taken care of by Yandan. However, it only took Princess Zhonglu 3 days to make Yin Dan own Zhonglu. From this, one could tell how important she was in Yin Dan's heart, and how much he loved her. Who dared to offend such a person? Who dared to offend her? Using the simplest words, Yen Bugui told Lu Chengfeng and Wu Qi, fearing that they would be disrespectful to Princess Zhonglu and bring trouble to themselves. After learning about Princess Zhongli's background and her towering arrogance in Ji City, Lu Chengfeng felt his head spinning and couldn't react for a long time. How did he offend such a disaster that he couldn't afford to offend? Princess Zhonglu was the most beloved granddaughter of Yin Dan, and she was his direct descendant. On the other hand, Lu Chengfeng was just a descendant of the 9th clan of Yin clan, which was founded by the 9th son of Yin Dan's concubine. Although he had shed a drop of his blood and returned to the clan, his background was, after all, an illegitimate son. No matter it was in terms of intimacy or seniority, there was a huge gap between him and Princess Zhonglu, and there was no way they could be compared. Following the pulling force of Yen Bugui, Lu Chengfeng knelt down on the ground, bowed feebly and said, Duke Yen Lu, Zhuo Guozheng of Great Yin Dynasty, offers greetings to Princess. Princess Zhonglu held her head high, snorted coldly and said, Yen Buji can be considered as a good man. He wandered around the world, and brought me many interesting and novel things from different kingdoms. Therefore, I still remember his kindness. But you're not a good man. On the first day you came to the city, you killed my good friend, Tabachinya, right in front of me, and killed so many of my personal guards. I'll make you pay for this. With her head held high, supported by 2 serving ladies, she slowly walked up the stairs of Duke Yenli's mansion. With a cold voice, Princess Zhonglu said, If I didn't show up, you could barely appease my anger with 5 million gold coins. But, since you've asked me to come out from the coach, do you think you can send away those lowly beggars with just 5 million gold coins? Escorted by a large group of imperial guards, Princess Zhonglu came straight to the main hall of Duke Yenli's mansion, where the guests were received. Without being greeted by anyone, she sat down on the main seat in the middle. She gave Lu Chengfeng a glance, whose face had turned pale. Then Princess Zhonglu said with a gentle voice, I'm not an unreasonable person. You've killed Tabachinya and many of my personal guards. Pay me 50 million gold coins, and I'll let this matter go. 50 million gold coins? Lu Chengfeng's face suddenly turned pale, while Yen Fu's face darkened. His eyes rolled up and he fainted on the ground. 50 million gold coins. This was the total annual tax revenue of the few strongest vassal kingdoms of Great Yin Dynasty. If Lu Chengfeng were to pay 50 million gold coins now, he would have to immediately sell off all the properties in his fief of 2 provinces, such as iron mountains, gold mines, copper mines, and all the other mines. He would also have to sell off all the shops and their employees. He would also have to sell off all the farmlands, forests, pastures, mansions, and everything else. Perhaps, he would be able to gather such a huge sum of money. Yen Bugui was struck dumb. He stared blankly at Princess Zhonglu, then asked an extremely stupid question. Your Highness, do you know how much 50 million gold coins are worth? Indifferently, Princess Zhonglu gazed at Yen Bugui, smiled and said, Indeed, I don't know how much 50 million gold coins are worth. But I'm sure it's worth 30 slaps. Slap yourself 30 times, and I'll forgive your offense. Yen Bugui swallowed a mouthful of saliva, raised his trembling hand, and was about to slap himself. A cold gleam flashed across Wu Qi's eyes. He recalled Yen Bugui's resolute and decisive killing in the woods of Meng Mountains, and recalled how he dashed into the midst of millions of barbarians, bathed in blood and slaughtering them. How could such a brave man slap himself just because of a sentence from a 15-year-old girl? An evil flame rushed up from his heart to his head. Suddenly, Wu Qi let out a laugh. Princess Zhonglu gazed at Wu Qi coldly, nodded her head and said, You're the one who killed my personal guards and wounded my demon ghost. Your name is Wu Qi, isn't it? Just now at the entrance of the mansion, you didn't kneel down and greet me. Now kneel down and give me 300 kowtows, and I won't ask my men to slap you. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and smiled brilliantly. His smile was filled with a dangerous aura. Almost instinctively, A dozen of palace guards stepped forward and stood between Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu. Princess Zhonglu looked at Wuqi curiously and asked, "What are you laughing at? Don't tell me you want to kill me?" Wuqi took a deep breath. Suddenly, his tone became extremely gentle and sweet, filled with a flirtatious, pinkish charm. This tone was the same one that came out from Lu Xiaobai's mouth when she was chased by dozens of beautiful girls in the red light district of Holland. "Your Highness, who is as beautiful as the stars in the sky, can you please listen to the heartfelt words of a lowly human being?" Obviously, Princess Zhonglu was startled. She blinked her eyes quickly and asked blankly, "What did you just say?" Wuqi smiled gently, like a spring breeze brushing through a field of dogtail flowers. He was extremely gentle, and filled with tenderness and sweetness as he said, "Actually, what I want to say is, your beauty should not exist in this world. But you are here. This is the gift from the heaven to all the humans in this world. Every frown and smile of yours, every move you make, even your soft voice, they are all so charming." The gentle words of love were like a trickle of water, slowly dripping into the tender heart of Princess Zhonglu. The heaven had taken pity on Princess Zhonglu, now that she was 15 years old, who in Great Yin Dynasty dared to talk to her like this. Wuqi repeated all the 11,000 classic lines of love he learned from Lu Xiaobai's soul fragment. And Princess Zhonglu was addicted to them. She had fallen. Chapter 78. In the back garden of Duke Yanli's mansion, all kinds of flowers were blooming in full bloom. The previous Duke Yanlu, Yanbuji, was a man who paid great attention to the atmosphere of life. In his back garden, apart from the fresh flowers that never wilted, the exotic fruit trees that bore fruit all year round, there were also countless strange and rare vines. In the center of the back garden, there was a small lake that measured about 1 mile in circumference. Ancient trees that stood over 200 feet tall could be seen lining the edge of the lake. Countless pale purple vines were seen pouring down from the ancient trees like a waterfall. These pale purple vines were the heavenly purple vine, an ancient species. With the help of the towering ancient trees, the vines and leaves formed into a pale purple curtain on the east and south side of the lake. Countless thumb-sized crimson vines were blooming, emitting a fragrant aroma under the dim light of the night. The entire back garden was filled with the aroma of these blooming heavenly purple vine. Amidst the dense vines, several dozens of large white birds had built their nests. Under the moonlight, these graceful birds were stretching their wings and letting out long and melodious chirps. Occasionally, a few large birds would be attracted by the moonlight, flapping their wings soundlessly and flying up into the sky, chasing after the shadow of the moon and casting their graceful shadows on the surface of the lake. On a floating platform in the center of the lake, measuring several tens of feet in both width and length, Wuqi and his company were having a merry time, drinking and enjoying themselves. Princess Zhonglu, who came to Wuqi with a large group of people, was sitting right next to Wuqi with a big smile on her face, clinking wine cups with Wuqi and drinking to their heart's content. She was a 15-year-old teenage girl who grew up in the depths of the imperial palace. Her birth mother had passed away when she was young, and her father and grandfather who doted on her had been in secluded cultivation all year round. Since she was young, no one had taken care of her, let alone making friends with her. Since Zhonglu was born, although she had been living a luxurious life, enjoying endless wealth and splendor, the truth was, she was just like a wild goat on the hillside, with no one taking care of her. Since she was young, she had never heard such splendid words of praise from Wuqi, and who dared to do that to her face? Even if there were some who approached her with various motives, how would these sons of the influential clans of Great Yin Dynasty have the courage to speak such sweet words of love to Princess Zhonglu, and speak such frivolous and flirtatious words to her? Only Wuqi dared to do so, and he really did it. Therefore, in just a short period of time, he had conquered Princess Zhonglu, who was only 15 years old and in the prime of her youth. Wuqi, you have to tell me the truth. Is Zhonglu really beautiful? Princess Zhongli's face was blushing. She was already half drunk. Not just beautiful, but absolutely beautiful. I swear to the heavens, in all these years, I have never seen a woman more beautiful than you. Compared to you, All the women in the world are not even worth a strand of your hair. Boldly, Wuqi reached out his hand and lifted a strand of Princess Zhongli's long hair. Slowly, he let the strand of hair slide down from his fingertip, glinting with a dark green hue under the moonlight. Princess Zhongli took a deep breath. Her blushing face became even more bashful. Is what you said true? But no one has ever told Zhongli that she is so beautiful. Princess Zhongli moved closer to Wuqi, and nearly half of her body was pressed into Wuqi's chest. Lu Chengfeng and Yan Bugui, who were standing at the side, were throwing sidelong glances at them. They kept pouring cup after cup of fine wine into their mouths while grimacing in pain. Wuqi smiled faintly, revealing his 8 snow-white teeth. Gently, he stroked Princess Zhongli's hair, then with a deep and charming voice he said, "All the women in the world will not praise your beauty in front of you, because they are jealous of you. Except for me, no man in the world dares to describe your perfection in front of you, because they are ashamed of their own inferiority." Princess Zhongli picked up her wine cup, smilingly clinked it with Wuqi's and said, "But why did you tell Zhongli the truth?" Wuqi pointed his finger at the surface of the lake. 20 feet away, a light pink lotus flower drifting on the surface of the lake floated up and landed on Wuqi's palm. He brought the lotus flower to Princess Zhongli and said with a low voice, "The gentleness of bowing her head is exactly like the shyness of the lotus flower. Princess, you are 10,000 times more beautiful than this flower." Princess Zhongli stared at Wuqi, her body and mind intoxicated. She snorted and said in a low voice, "You haven't told me, why did you tell Zhongli the truth?" Placing the lotus flower on Princess Zhongli's palm, Wuqi sighed and said, "The dark night has given me a pair of black eyes, and I am using them to find the most beautiful light in the dark night. The reason why Wuqi told Princess the truth is that I was born for the beauty of Princess." Lu Chengfeng suddenly shivered. Shivering, he turned his head and stared blankly at the patch of heavenly purple radish blooming at the edge of the lake. Princess Zhongli brought the lotus flower closer to her face and took a deep breath. Her beautiful eyes turned watery, and her rosy lips curved into a beautiful smile. Boldly, she reached out her hand and touched Wuqi's cheek, then said with a gentle voice, "Are you born for my beauty? Are you born for Zhongli? What you said, no one has ever told Zhongli before." "You're a good man, you're a very good man," murmured Princess Zhongli. "Tabaqingye is not a good man." Boldly, Wuqi held Princess Zhongli's hand and said with a gentle voice, "Princess, please understand. Tabaqingye wants to kill Wuqi, but he asked Princess to just stand aside and watch the show. Obviously, he is using Princess as a shield. If not because Wuqi has some abilities, perhaps he would have succeeded long ago, and Princess wouldn't be able to see Wuqi today." Sighing lightly, Wuqi stared deeply into Princess Zhongli's blurry eyes, sighed and said, "The rarest thing in life is to find a bosom friend. But Princess is Wuqi's bosom friend. For so many years, this is the first time Wuqi told a girl the words in his heart." Princess Zhongli smiled, a very charming smile. Gently, she stroked Wuqi's cheek and said with a gentle voice, "Bosom friend?" "Yes." Zhongli finally understood. Tabaqingye is really up to no good. He knows that Zhongli is bored in the palace, so he purposely sent someone to tell Zhongli that there will be a good show tonight, and asked Zhongli to wait at the place where he ambushed you. He is trying to use Zhongli's influence to atone for his crime. Wuqi nodded his head heavily and said with a deep voice, "Princess is a wise and far-sighted person. How could those despicable people hide their thoughts from Princess?" Princess Zhongli's face turned slightly unsightly. She said coldly, "I had forgotten about this, but when Tuoba Haofeng returned to Ji City today, he purposely mentioned this to me. Is he trying to trick me into giving Wuqi a hard time?" Wuqi nodded his head and said, "That must be it. You're right. Princess, both Tabaqingye and that Tuoba Haofeng are using Princess." Wuqi breathed out a faint sigh, then looked at Princess Zhongli affectionately and said, "Princess, you are the pearl of immortal dew, a figure like a heaven immortal. The mortal world should never taint your pure soul. However, there are countless mortals in the world, and they are always trying to use Princess. In the future, Princess, you must be cautious in your actions, and never fall into the evil intentions of those people. Princess Zhongli's face darkened. She clenched her teeth tightly and said in a cold voice, "You're right. In the future, if someone wants to talk to me, I'll come and ask you." Do you really think that just because I was born in the palace, I don't know anything? Wuqi, you're a good man, an honest man. I understand that. Wuqi smiled. He beckoned Lu Chengfeng and Yan Bugui to come up and propose a toast to Princess Zhongli. Then he shared a few cups of wine with Princess Zhongli, whose face was filled with a smile. After that, Wuqi purposely picked out some things that a pampered princess who was born in the palace would never know, and told them to Princess Zhongli as if they were some strange stories from the countryside. From the marketplace of Little Meng City, to the life of a barbarian hunter, to the life of a wandering swordsman, to the life of Yan Bugui leading 80 of his subordinates in the deep mountains and forests, Wuqi had a very good eloquence. He described all these things in a vivid manner, as if he had seen them with his own eyes. Since when had Princess Zhongli ever heard any of these? Using some techniques from the romance of Sui and Tang dynasties, Wuqi added some details to the life of those barbarian hunters and wandering swordsmen, which made Princess Zhongli even more fascinated. She thought that those wandering swordsmen and barbarian hunters who lived on the edge of a blade were all heroes with an indomitable spirit. When Wuqi told her about how Yan Bugui brought his subordinates and went through all kinds of hardships in the depth of Meng Mountains, going through life and death battles, and finally bringing back 3 precious black stone tablets for Great Yan Dynasty, he had added some extra artistic touches to the story, describing Yan Bugui as a tall, strong, and nearly perfect man of Great Yan Dynasty. And those dangers that Yan Bugui encountered in Meng Mountains were described by Wuqi in a magnificent manner, just like a Hollywood blockbuster. Princess Zhongli was fascinated by the story. She couldn't help but nod her head at Yan Bugui and said, "You're Yan Bugui? You're a good man. Next time, I'll talk to my father, and he'll confer you the title of general." Yan Bugui was struck dumb, and couldn't react for quite a long while. Wuqi was blushing after coming up with all these nonsense. How could he fool Princess Zhongli to promise him the title of general? Yan Qijuan loved Princess Zhongli the most. But if she were to speak to him, perhaps it would really come true. The moon was hanging high in the sky, and it was late at night. Zhongli, who was almost drunk, had to return to the imperial palace. In front of all the serving ladies and guards, Princess Zhongli held Wuqi's hand and walked out of Duke Yanli's mansion. She was laughing and giggling along the way, feeling extremely joyful. At the entrance of Duke Yanli's mansion, Princess Zhongli held Wuqi's hand, smiled and promised him, "Wuqi, you're my best friend now. Sometimes I have to focus on my cultivation, so I can't visit you often. When you're free, come to Garden of Zhongli or the Imperial Palace to visit me." Reaching out her hand, she untied an oval-shaped green jade from around her neck. Princess Zhongli tied the jade around Wuqi's neck. The palace guards nearby were dumbfounded when they saw this intimate behavior. Lu Qingfeng and Yan Bugui were dumbfounded. Princess Zhongli's jade pendant was given to Wuqi just like that. This was Princess Zhongli's personal item. Wuqi took out the 3,800 years old innate water serpent core from his storage bag and gave it to Princess Zhongli. Wuqi doesn't have anything valuable with him, but this inner core of a spirit beast is what Wuqi uses for his daily cultivation. "Today, I'll give it to you, Princess." Princess Zhongli stared blankly at the innate water serpent core in Wuqi's hand. Suddenly, she let out a sweet smile and held it in her hand. Princess Zhongli cast a sideways glance at Wuqi, chuckled and said, "Count yourself lucky. Zixian is very happy with this inner core." Her red lips came close to Wuqi's ear. Princess Zhongli said softly, "Remember, Zhongli's name is Zixian." Slowly they boarded the coach. Surrounded by numerous guards, Princess Zhongli and Yan Zixian left. Wuqi took a deep breath, clasped his hands behind his back and stared at the bright moon in the sky. Suddenly, he breathed out a sigh and said, "Young master, I suddenly have a very guilty feeling." Lu Qingfeng and Yan Bugui exchanged a glance, then nodded their heads at the same time. Chapter 79. The morning dew had moistened the streets of Ji City, and a misty white mist was drifting and lingering in the streets and alleys. Riding on a single horned deer, Wuxia brought a group of attendants back to Duke Yan Li's mansion. Early in the morning, he brought Lu Qingfeng's authorization document and visited 7 government offices that were related to fiefs in Ji City. With great effort, he finally helped Yu Xian obtain the fief of a county that was offered as a reward by Chief General Jing Ke. The reward offered by Chief General was set in stone, and there was no loophole in it. A fief of a county was very attractive, but if it wasn't Yu Xian, who was an influential person, or if it was the previous Lu Qingfeng, it might not be a blessing for him to obtain this fief. Perhaps on the second day after he obtained the fief, he would drown in a river for no apparent reason, just like his birth father. Even if it were the current Duke Lu Qingfeng, if he were to obtain a huge fief for no apparent reason, he would definitely be envied by the other influential members of various sections. This was not a good thing for Lu Qingfeng's development in Great Yan Dynasty. Therefore, he decided to let Yu Xian, who held a high position and held a great power, bear this trouble. Besides, without this fief as a reward, it was still a question whether Lu Qingfeng could inherit the title of Duke Yan Lu. But now, this fief was finally transferred to Yu Xian's hand using all kinds of excuses. The trouble was gone. Lu Qingfeng could sit firmly on the seat of Duke Yan Lu, and he had also gained the friendship of all the imperial elders of Great Yan Dynasty, represented by Yu Xian. With that, Lu Qingfeng's foundation had become even more solid. The clatter of hooves was loud and clear. Wuxia dismounted from his mount in front of the entrance of Duke Yan Li's mansion, and under the attentive greeting of a few gatekeepers, he walked up the stairs. He pulled off his cloak that was stained with dew and handed it to one of the guards. When Wuxia was about to enter the mansion, a luxurious coach suddenly came out from an alley not far away. One of Princess Zhang Li's serving ladies poked her head out from the coach and called out to him with a clear voice, "Mr. Wuxia." Wuxia was taken aback, then hastily walked up to her and bowed gracefully to the serving lady. "Oh, Miss Baizhu, what can I do for you?" Of the 2 serving ladies of Princess Zhang, one of them was called Baizhu, who was standing in front of Wuxia. She had a slender and intelligent appearance, and was a natural-born beauty. The other one was called Bai Miao. Her figure was plump and round, and she had a tender and naive personality. Moreover, she was slightly silly. Between both of them, the one who was usually in charge of handling all sorts of affairs for Princess Zhang Lu was this clever and witty Baizhu. Baizhu covered her mouth and giggled, then lowered her voice and said, "I have something to do." She rolled her eyes and gave the surroundings a glance. After ordering a few palace guards who followed closely beside the coach to leave, Baizhu giggled and said, "When Princess woke up early this morning, she immediately asked someone to go to Garden of Zhanglu. She wants all the lakes and rivers in Garden of Zhanglu to be filled with water lotuses. Mr. Wuqi, you've brought quite a lot of trouble to the stewards in Garden of Zhanglu. Hee, the lakes and rivers in Garden of Zhanglu are quite old." Wuqi let out a hollow laugh. Yesterday he was forced to do that to Princess Zhanglu, who was a little girl, and caused her to be in a daze. This was not the behavior of a real man. However, Princess Zhanglu actually remembered the water lotus Wuqi gave her, and she wanted all the lakes and rivers in Garden of Zhanglu to be filled with water lotuses. This made Wuqi a little dumbfounded and speechless. Baizhu winked at Wuqi. She rummaged in her sleeve and took out an exquisite dark golden ring, handing it over to Wuqi. It was a very exquisite ring. Its main body was dark golden in color, and 9 sesame-sized, dark blue gemstones were inlaid on its surface. Following the movement of Baizhu's fingers, a faint glow rippled from the ring, making it look magnificent, noble, and mysterious. Princess told me that Mr. Wuqi is using a low-grade storage bag. It just so happens that Princess has an extra storage ring, and its quality is not bad. I hope Mr. doesn't mind it and you can use it for now. The things inside the ring were given to Princess by His Majesty and His Majesty over the years. Princess doesn't need them, but Mr. can keep them for fun. Baizhu grabbed Wuqi's hand and shoved the ring into Wuqi's palm. Then she continued, Princess has come to a critical moment in her cultivation. She has to enter into a meditative state every half a month. If it's a short period, she will come out from her meditation in 2 to 3 days, and if it's a long period, it might take 2 to 3 months. Even Princess herself has no idea how long she will need to enter into a meditative state. In short, when Princess comes out from her meditation, she will come and look for Mr. I hope Mr. doesn't miss her. Tilting her head, Baizhuer gazed at Wuqi, who seemed to be in a daze. Then, she slapped her own forehead, giggled and said, I almost forgot. She reached her hand into another sleeve and fumbled for a while, then pulled out a palm-sized dark green medallion, and shoved it into Wuqi's palm. This is the token of 7 swallows, the highest authority in Ji City that Princess can obtain. With this token, Mr. can freely enter and exit the inner city at night, and the imperial palace during the day. Apart from a few forbidden places and secret palaces, you can go anywhere you want. Taking a deep breath, Baizhuer continued. The authority of this token of 7 swallows is extremely great. Princess has only reported it to Mr., and you can never let it fall into the hands of anyone else. After giving Wuqi a few hurried instructions, Baizhuer kept thinking about Princess Zhonglu, who had once again entered into a meditative state. Thus, she hastily urged her servants to send her back to the imperial palace. Wuqi took out a storage ring and a token, and couldn't say a word for a long while. The token of swallow was a special token of Great Yan Dynasty. It was entirely dark green in color, the favorite color of the influential members of Great Yan Dynasty, and it was also the color of the court attire worn by all the ministers of Great Yan Dynasty. There were patterns of wind and clouds engraved on the token, and swallows could be seen flying amidst the wind and clouds. The lowest was 1 swallow, and the highest was 9 swallows. The token of 9 swallows was owned by only Emperor Yandan. According to the legends, the token of 8 swallows was only owned by Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, and a few other important ministers. The token owned by the 8 princes was only at the level of 7 swallows. With this token, one could basically do whatever he wanted in Ji City. However, the token that Princess Zhonglu applied for Wuqi was at the level of 7 swallows. From this, it could be seen that Princess Zhonglu held a mighty power in Ji City, and it could also be seen that she had a strange relationship with Wuqi. Twitching his lips, Wuqi fiddled with the token for a while, then shoved it into the storage ring. He smiled bitterly and said, How did I end up in a situation where I used a little goldfish to deceive a little girl? With just a few plagiarized words and a little bit of scheming, I've managed to seduce a descendant of a noble family. Am I too lucky? Or am I too unlucky? Laughing bitterly, Wuqi dripped a drop of blood onto the storage ring, then branded a thread of divine sense onto it. With that, he had successfully taken over the ownership of the ring. When he sent his divine sense into the ring, he was immediately startled by the huge space inside. The storage bag he stole from Old Devil and Lord Flame only had the storage space of 3 rooms, and the standard size of a room was only 15 feet in both width and length, and less than 10 feet in height. At this moment, the storage bag was fully filled with all the gold, silver, jewelry, and all kinds of energy stones and minerals he had found in Little Meng City. As for the storage ring given to him by Princess Zhonglu, it was about 1,000 feet in both width and length, and the height was about 1,000 feet as well. It was simply the storage space of a skyscraper. The huge space inside looked a little empty, and a few huge bronze chests were hovering in midair, emanating faint ripples of energy. Wuqi scanned through the bronze chests with his divine sense, and couldn't help but twitch his lips. These chests measured 6 feet in both width and length, and were about 3 feet in height. The characters of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial treasury were engraved on their covers. From the nameplate underneath, Wuqi could tell that these chests were the inventory of Great Yan Dynasty's strategic storage, but they were taken out by Princess Zhonglu as a favor. There was a total of 8 chests, and all of them were neatly polished, each the size of an adult's fist. All of them were upper-grade water elemental energy. All of them were dark blue in color, glinting brightly like the color of the deepest ocean, and contained an extremely powerful water elemental energy. The total amount of upper-grade water elemental energy stones in these 8 chests was at least 100,000. These were the strategic storage of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial treasury. Only God knew how Princess Zhongli took them out from the imperial treasury, and how did she erase the trace of these energy stones from the account book. Wu Qi felt his scalp go numb, and he couldn't help but admire the audacity of Princess Zhongli. Why do I have a feeling that I've become Xiaobai, that guy who lives off a woman all year round? Shaking his head in a self-mocking manner, Wu Qi used his divine sense to scan the several dozens of cold jade medicine bottles placed next to the 8 bronze chests. There was a mark on each of these medicine bottles, which was engraved with the words innate water pill. There was a total of 36 medicine bottles, and in each of them were 12 half-transparent, dark blue spirit pills, the size of a pigeon's egg. They were emanating powerful ripples of water elemental energy. Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was much stronger than Wu Qi's. After all, when she was born, she already had the cultivation of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. On top of that, she had been cultivating for over 10 years. Although she was always playing around, with the help of countless spirit medicines and energy stones provided by Great Yin Dynasty, she had now steadily stepped into the embryonic breath realm of Xiantian realm. However, with the help of those spirit pills, she still maintained the beauty and vigor of a young girl. Unlike those cultivators of embryonic breath tier, who were over 100 years old. With Princess Zhongli's cultivation base, she could naturally tell that Wu Qi was cultivating with water elemental energy, and the innate water serpent pill he gave to Princess Zhongli was also the inner pill of a water elemental spirit beast. A teenage girl was always so ignorant and impulsive. Since she had a good impression of Wu Qi, she wished she could give all the good things under the heaven to Wu Qi. When Wu Qi gave her the innate water serpent pill as a gift, she immediately gave him 8 chests of upper-grade water elemental energy stones, and several hundred spirit pills that could enhance the cultivation of water elemental energy. Wu Qi sighed lightly and shook his head again. Upper-grade water elemental energy stones. After searching for so long in Little Meng City, Wu Qi had never seen an upper-grade energy stone with his own eyes. If not for the record in Scroll of Stealing, he wouldn't be able to recognize that these chests contained upper-grade water elemental energy stones. As for the innate water pill, with the insight Wu Qi inherited from Scroll of Stealing, he could tell that it was a lower-grade spirit pill of decent quality. Each pill could at least enhance the cultivation base of a cultivator of respiration tier of Xiantian realm, after 1 year of arduous cultivation. 36 bottles of spirit pills were more than enough for Wu Qi to cultivate to the embryonic breath tier in the shortest time possible. Furthermore, his foundation would be extremely stable, and there would be no danger of his foundation being shaken. If she wasn't the most beloved princess of Great Yin Dynasty, if she were someone else, how could she easily take out so many things just to return the favor? The hardest thing to accept is the kindness of a beauty. Is she my luck in love? Or is she my misfortune in love? Without saying a word, Wu Qi transferred all the things in the bag into his storage ring. He swore in his mind. Fine Princess Zhongli Zixian, no matter it is my luck in love or misfortune in love, I Wu Qi will take it all. Could it be that he Wu Qi didn't even have the courage to accept the kindness of a little beauty? Letting out a long laugh, Wu Qi casually threw the empty bag to Meng Xiaobai, who was standing in front of the door. Xiaobai, this treasure is yours now. Chapter 80. Wu Qi leaned his back against the window, looking down at those young men who were having fun wantonly a few levels below. A faint sneer could be seen on his face. They were still young, and their seniors still had several dozens of years to hold the power. Therefore, they still had several dozens of years to waste. To them, being absurd once in a while was just a small matter that was pleasing to the eyes, and nothing serious. The rest of them were from wealthy clans as well. Although they were not the eldest son, their status was not low, and they were highly valued in their clans. They were the candidates for the main leadership of their clans. Wu Qi smiled, then spat a mouthful of phlegm towards Tuoba Haofeng, who was standing on the deck. Without a doubt, as the clan leader of the 9th clan of Great Yin Dynasty, Lu Qingfeng held the title of duke and the official position of Zhuo Guozheng. Lu Qingfeng had the highest status and noblest status among all of them. Therefore, all the young men who surrounded him were from the most influential and wealthy clans in Great Yin Dynasty. Some of their seniors were serving as officials in the imperial court, and they were at least holding the position of prime minister or above. There were even a few young men whose seniors held the prestigious positions of the 9 ministers. Suddenly a shrill scream was heard. A young girl, who could not be older than 14 years old, had her clothes ripped off by a few playboys. Laughing and laughing merrily, they lifted her up and threw her into the river. One of the playboys quickly stripped off his clothes, yelling and yelling as he leaped off the boat, and hugged the girl who was laughing and shrieking. 2 meatworms were tangled up in the river. Amidst the girl's strange cry of pain, a stream of blood slowly drifted on the surface of the water. As if he had sensed Wu Qi's gaze, the purple-robed young man raised his head abruptly, staring fiercely at Wu Qi with a pair of eyes as sharp as blades. Therefore Lu Chengfeng indulged in debauchery, drinking and visiting prostitutes with these young men, singing and having fun, disguising himself as a playboy. Apart from the occasional sharp glint that flashed in Lu Chengfeng's eyes, anyone could tell that he was a good-for-nothing from head to toe. Moreover, he was the kind of good-for-nothing who was extremely lucky and had accumulated a lot of good karma in his previous life. Great Yin dynasty had been established for over 2,000 years. Of course, there were elites like Yen Bugui, who could brave the frost and snow to carry out the military mission in the remote mountains, and he would be gone for 3 to 5 years. Naturally, there were also those good-for-nothings who, because of their good backgrounds, had their bright futures decided since they were young, so they were all good-for-nothings. There was a kind of restlessness in his soul that wanted Wu Qi to join these debauches and enjoy those young and beautiful bodies to his heart's content. However, the firmness and calmness that came from the depths of Wu Qi's soul shattered this restlessness. This was not what he was pursuing, and he was not willing to waste his time and energy on such a meaningless thing. It was as if a group of devils were dancing chaotically on the pleasure boat, and the atmosphere was foul. Wu Qi threw away the wine cup and kicked away 2 courtesans who were trying to leap at him. Obviously, they had consumed a large amount of immortal ascension powder as well. Wu Qi frowned. Lu Chengfeng had gradually gained a firm foothold in Ji City, and had begun to expand his social network. It was time for Wu Qi to start making some plans. Therefore, on a small hill next to Myriad Red River, someone had occupied a large piece of land and built a large number of villas, countless restaurants and brothels. There were also nearly 1,000 pleasure boats of different sizes on the river, and it had become the largest entertainment venue in Ji City. Almost half of the young men on this boat were the eldest sons of various influential clans. If nothing went wrong, they would inherit the official positions and titles of nobility of their clans in Great Yin dynasty. In the future, they would be the high officials who could control the future of Great Yin dynasty. But at the moment, they were just a group of debauches from influential clans, spending their youth and energy in an unbridled manner on the pleasure boat. Taba Haofeng's challenge resounded throughout the entire pleasure boat. The noisy pleasure boat that was filled with a foul atmosphere a moment ago suddenly turned into a deathly silence. Great Yin dynasty had been established for over 2,000 years, but it had never developed the modern technology found on Earth. At most, the common people could only collect some natural coal and use it as fuel. There was no pollution in this world. Therefore, the river was extremely clear. The red leaves and the colorful petals merged together on the surface of the Myriad Red River, which was dark green in color and crystal clear. It was as if countless fresh flowers and red leaves were wrapped in a transparent crystal. It was an extremely gorgeous and charming scene. Although he had received a large amount of energy stones and spirit pills from Princess Zhanglu, Wu Qi still wanted to join an immortal sect. Lu Chengfeng needed a foundation, and so did Wu Qi. Among the itinerant cultivators, it was impossible for there to be a cultivator who was too strong, but among the immortal sects, the existence of geniuses was allowed. The white meat worms rolled and rolled on the deck of the pleasure boat, and the sound of their bodies hitting each other could be heard coming from far away. A couple dozens of hedonistic young masters were clapping and cheering excitedly, and some of them were even whistling shrilly like local ruffians. A large group of gorgeously dressed girls were mingling among these hedonistic young masters, trying their best to seduce them. The upper reaches of the Myriad Red River was a stretch of lofty mountains and lofty ridges. It was filled with trees that looked like maple trees, called gillen of red leaves. Throughout the year, palm-sized red leaves drifted into the river along with the wind, and were brought down by the rushing water. Half of the river was dyed red, and that was how it got its name. Both sides of the myriad red river were farmlands and manors developed by the people of Great Yin Dynasty. The people of Great Yin Dynasty, who were born to be close to nature, had planted all kinds of flowers and trees along the banks of the river. Flowers bloomed and never withered in all 4 seasons, and countless colorful petals fell into the river, dyeing the entire river with 7 colors. When the countless petals and leaves of the myriad red river flowed into it, the entire river was dyed with a myriad of colors. The purple-robed young man, who was smiling brightly just a moment ago, had his expression changed instantly, turning into a sinister and ferocious look. He pursed his lips, pointed his finger at Wuxia and snapped, "Are you Wuxia, the hanger-on of Duke Yinlu Duke Qingfeng? You've killed my elder brother, and today, Tuoba Haofeng will fight you to the death." Clang! A sword cry rang out, as Tuoba Haofeng drew out his sword and forcefully threw it towards Wuxia. "I need to find someone and ask around, and find out how many immortal sects Great Yin Dynasty has. Of course, I can forget about those sects that are purely official like Mo sect and Scouting Office, as I don't have the mood to risk my life for Great Yin Dynasty." Wuxia murmured to himself in a low voice, calculating his plan in his mind. The fact that Lu Qingfeng was able to join a gathering like this, mingling with these young men, it meant that the clans behind these young men had begun to approach Lu Qingfeng, and had begun to cautiously approach Lu Qingfeng and build a relationship with him. Perhaps, these influential clans would not pledge their allegiance to Lu Qingfeng, but it was never a bad thing for them to build a relationship with a core member of the imperial clan. Wuxia tilted his head, and the sword flew past his face, piercing deeply into a beam behind him. All of a sudden, those profligate sons who were fooling around on the deck below let out a loud cheer, greeting someone in a chaotic manner. Wuxia breathed out a faint sigh, raised up the wine vessel, and slowly drank 2 mouthfuls of wine. The myriad red river was a very wide river, and the Celestial Music Palace was at least 30 miles away from the riverbank. There were dozens of warships with strange designs that had sealed off the nearby waters, forbidding any other ships from approaching. Therefore, no matter how these profligate sons were indulging in debauchery, no one would know about it. In other words, it was the myriad red river that nourished Ji City, nourished the people of Great Yin Dynasty. The fertile grassland and hills along the riverbank were the foundation of Great Yin Dynasty. Nearly 70% of the people of Great Yin Dynasty drank the water from the myriad red river, ate the fishes found in the river, and ate all kinds of crops grown in the fertile farmlands of the myriad red river. It was evening, and Lu Qingfeng was together with Wuxia on the largest pleasure boat in the myriad red river, the Celestial Music Palace. They were mingling with a group of young nobles of Great Yin Dynasty. The sound of music and dance was pleasing to the ears, and the boat was filled with the joyful voices of the group of young men. From time to time, some drunken men would slip off the side of the boat and fall into the river, while some would clap their hands and laugh out loud, and some would hastily jump into the river to rescue them. The setting sun was hanging in the west, where the sky and the river met. Half of the river was dyed red by the sunset, while the other half of the river was colorful and gorgeous. Apart from Wuxia, who was leaning against the window, no one else had the time to enjoy such a breathtaking scene. Some foppish men had already consumed the immortal ascension powder, which was made from some unknown raw material, and were stripping themselves naked, chasing after those singers and dancers, who were screaming and twisting their slender bodies while fleeing in all directions. A few coquettish singers accidentally stepped on the hem of their skirts and fell to the ground. The few foppish men quickly straightened their bodies and pressed on them impatiently. All of a sudden, a young man in his 30s, who was drinking and chatting merrily with Lu Qingfeng a moment ago, clapped his hands and laughed out loud. "Ha ha ha! Tuoba Haofeng is known as the #1 swordsman of the younger generation in Ji City. Mr. Wuxia, do you have the courage to fight with me?" The pleasure boat of the Celestial Music Palace measured 500 feet from the front to the back, and was built with 3 layers of pavilions. Wuxia and his company were sitting in the banquet hall on the highest layer. Lu Qingfeng had his arms around two young and beautiful singers, laughing and joking with a few young men from influential clans. Lu Qingfeng's birth father, Yan Buji, had lost his footing and fell into the myriad Red River one night, drowning to his death. He was a young man with a handsome face that almost looked like a demon. His skin was as white as a sheet of paper, and it was his biggest feature. Even his lips were as white as snow, devoid of any color of blood. He was clad in a purple robe, and there was no crown on his head. Instead, his hair was tied up with a red silk rope. He looked elegant and unrestrained, and his words and actions were calm and magnanimous. He was filled with the graceful and luxurious demeanor of someone from an influential clan. Wuqi quickly poked his head out and gave the deck a glance. Compared to him, those foppish men who were indulging themselves crazily around him were like a group of mice in a sewer who met a noble lion. They were not on the same level at all. Just when a fast ship was nearing the railing of the pleasure boat, a young man clad in a purple robe was seen leaping up lightly and landing on the deck of the boat together with a few attendants. Those foppish men greeted this young man one after another, and in a calm and unruffled manner, the young man returned their greetings one by one. Ji City was located at the intersection of the main stream of the myriad Red River and a main tributary, the myriad Red River. It was the same for Lu Qingfeng. If he could have a good relationship with these clans who held the real power, it would be much more convenient for him to do anything in the future. The myriad Red River was the largest river near Ji City. Compared to the Yangtze River that Wuqi knew, no matter it was the length, width, depth, or even the flow of water per second, the myriad Red River was at least 100 times larger than the Yangtze River. It was a huge river that ran across the entire territory of over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty from east to west, and its drainage basin covered nearly half of the entire Great Yan Dynasty. Chapter 81. Throwing away the long sword in his hand, Tuoba Haofeng steadied his body in midair, then casually pulled out a silver-colored talisman from his waist. While still in midair, Tuoba Haofeng let out a wild laugh and said, "Wuqi, you're going to die today." Avoiding Lu Qingfeng's stern gaze, Haoying Fenglong clasped his hands behind his back and walked to the window, giving Tuoba Haofeng a smile. He gave Wuqi a sidelong glance and said coldly, "Of course." In fact, Tuoba Haofeng has sent out a few hanger-ons to duel with Mr. Wuqi. That's how their statuses are. A mouthful of blood sprayed onto the talisman. Then Tuoba Haofeng pointed the talisman at Wuqi. Tuoba Haofeng laughed arrogantly. He gave Wuqi a disdainful look, his handsome face filled with pride and complacency, and said, "The chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard, Qin Qingshui, has made a decision on this matter today. Through the investigation of the crime scene and the testimonies of numerous witnesses, my elder brother, Tuoba Qingya, heard an unusual noise and went out to investigate. Out of kindness, he rescued Duke Yanlu and Duke Qingfeng, but he was mistakenly killed by you on the spot." Tuoba Haofeng immediately cried out sternly, "Wuqi, don't drag our personal enmity into this. You've killed my elder brother, Tuoba Qingya, and I'll definitely avenge this. Qin Qingshui, I really want to see what kind of scheme you have in your mind." Lu Qingfeng's heart was filled with hatred. He turned around abruptly and gave Haoying Fenglong a fierce glare. It just so happened that Haoying Fenglong was looking at Lu Qingfeng as well. When he saw Lu Qingfeng's ferocious gaze, he suddenly squeezed out a smile and nodded at Lu Qingfeng. However, there was not even a hint of a smile in that smile, and it looked very fake. Dead silence. In particular, the singers and dancers of the Celestial Music Immortal Palace covered their mouths tightly. Lu Qingfeng's expression flickered. It was obvious that Tuoba Qingya had used prohibited weapons, and had even activated the city defense mechanism of Ji City to assassinate him. Yet in the end Tuoba Qingya had become a good man who stood up for justice. Moreover, this good man was mistakenly killed by Wuqi. Now Tuoba Haofeng was in the right? Even flying flowers and leaves could hurt people. A mouthful of phlegm from a warrior of the Meridian cultivating tier was no weaker than a bullet from a large caliber sniper rifle. Tuoba Haofeng's eyes turned red. He lost his composure and roared out, then exerted all his strength to hack 72 times at Wuqi. On the other side, Wuqi's heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't say anything for a long while. He could not believe that something that turned black and white upside down had happened just like that. With a sense of superiority that came from his innate talent, Tuoba Haofeng turned to the group of hedonistic sons and said, "All of you are the best friends of Tuoba Haofeng, and I want you to be the judge of this matter." When Haofeng's elder brother heard the unusual commotion, he brought many guards and went out to rescue Duke Yanlu, who was attacked. But in the end, he was brutally killed by Wuqi and his men. "Don't you think that my elder brother was wronged? Should I seek revenge from Wuqi?" Those hedonistic sons were looking at each other, and apart from a few who had consumed too much immortal ascension powder, none of them said a word. Although they were hedonistic sons, they were not stupid. Participating in the battle between the Xian kingdom and a duke was something that only a stupid pig would do. It was true that Lu Chengfeng was the clan leader of a branch clan of Great Yan dynasty, but the monarch of Xian kingdom, Tuoba clan, also had the title of duke. On top of that, he had established his own kingdom, and his actual power was much stronger than Lu Chengfeng, a duke. Wuqi turned his head and gave those hedonistic sons on the deck a look of excitement. He sneered and said, "You know I've killed Tuoba Qingye, but why did I kill him? Do you know the ins and outs of the matter? He used a military crossbow, trying to assassinate my young master." Unhurriedly, Wuqi stood where he was, using his sword to block Tuoba Haofeng's sword with ease. Tuoba Haofeng's sword technique was ingenious, but his cultivation base was merely at the peak of Hotian realm. Thus he posed no threat to Wuqi. In Great Yan dynasty, the Minister of Justice was in charge of all the laws and punishments, and it held a great power. Haoying clan was a wealthy clan that rose in the recent 700 years, not the clan that founded Great Yan dynasty. The founding clans of Great Yan dynasty, such as Jing clan, Gao clan, and Qin clan, and the Haoying clan, Chenshan clan, Gao Xian clan, and many others that rose after the founding of Great Yan dynasty, had always had a clear distinction in the imperial court of Great Yan dynasty. In the banquet hall behind Wuqi, Haoying Fenglong, one of the 9 ministers of Great Yan dynasty, the Minister of Justice, Haoying clan, suddenly laughed. "Duke Yanlu, you're wrong. Although the Xian kingdom is one of the vassal states of Great Yan dynasty, and the monarch of Xian kingdom is also a duke in Great Yan dynasty. Although Tuoba Haofeng is just a son of a concubine, and he wants to fight with the hanger-on of Duke Yanlu, it is because of Mr. Wuqi's status." Laughing wildly, Tuoba Haofeng suddenly leaped towards Wuqi like a wild tiger that had gone mad. His right arm spun like a windmill, slashing 13 times towards Wuqi's head. The sword beams moved like lightning, bringing with them an immense coldness as they circled around Wuqi's body. His sword technique was broad and simple and heavy. When the sword strikes were unleashed, it felt like a great mountain was pressing down from above, trying to crush Wuqi into pieces. Wuqi lowered his head and looked at all the people on the deck. He sneered disdainfully. The wind brought by the sword was whistling, and the sword beams were as dense as raindrops. However, with his mind in a chaotic state, how could Tuoba Haofeng possibly hurt Wuqi? Wuqi dodged his attack effortlessly, then sprung his right leg and kicked right onto Tuoba Haofeng's lower abdomen, sending him flying 70 to 80 feet away. Great skill, great cultivation base. Tuoba Haofeng took a deep breath, raised his head and looked at Wuqi, sneered and said, "Can you fight a duel to the death with me?" All the information about Great Yan dynasty that he had sorted out during the past few days flashed across Wuqi's mind. He laughed self-mockingly and said, "What young Master Fenglong is trying to say is that Tuoba Haofeng has given me a great honor by challenging me to a duel?" Tuoba Haofeng's sword technique changed. From the heavy and simple sword technique, it changed into a soft and gentle sword technique that was as dense as the spring breeze and drizzle. He lowered his voice and roared with a twisted face. "The day before yesterday, Princess Zhonglu went to Duke Yanli's mansion, and when she came back, she ordered someone to give me a scolding. Today, I went to the imperial palace to seek an audience with Princess, and she granted me the permission. But today, I was chased out by Baizhuer with a stick in her hand. If this is not because of you, then what is the reason?" With a bright and innocent smile on his face, Wuxia looked like an innocent and adorable child who knew nothing about the world. However, his tone was extremely evil and ghastly. Hee, the chastity of Princess Zhongli will be mine. In a few days, I'll pluck this fresh flower and enjoy it to my heart's content. It is said that a girl will never forget her first man for the rest of her life. Both men fought fiercely for over a dozen rounds. The raging sword energies forced those hedonistic sons and those ladies who were watching the fight to stay far away from the bow of the ship. There was no one left within a circumference of 100 feet. Using the momentum of the sword, Tuoba Haofeng thrust himself into the circle of swords formed by Wuxia. Suddenly he laughed and asked in a low voice, "Wuxia, do you really think I'm here to avenge that idiot, Tuoba Qingya? Do you really think I'm that stupid?" Then he waved both arms and unleashed an invisible energy that pushed those hedonistic sons, singers and dancers far away. Standing before Tuoba Haofeng, Wuxia stretched out his hand toward Tuoba Haofeng and gently crooked his finger at him. "Tuoba Haofeng, come, I'd like to see what your Xian kingdom is trying to do." Viciously, he thrust his sword at Wuxia for over 30 times, each strike never leaving Wuqi's chest and neck. "You've killed Tuoba Qingya," Tuoba Haofeng cried out fiercely in a low voice. "I don't have enough time to thank you for that. But you've made Princess Zhongli keep her distance from me. This hatred, can't be washed away even with all the water in the myriad Red River. Wuxia, do you know that if not for you sooner or later, I would have made Princess Zhongli my woman?" The silver talisman measured 2 feet and 4 inches long, and 6 inches wide. On its surface, there was only a simple image of a sword piercing into the sky. When the talisman was unleashed, the surrounding air became extremely sharp. The breeze from the river blew across Wuqi's body, causing him to feel a slight pain on his skin and flesh. All the hedonistic sons on the deck could only see a white beam flashing by. Suddenly, Tuoba Haofeng, who had been acting calmly and magnanimously, took a quick step back, wielded the sword in his hand and slashed into the air. A loud clang rang out. Tuoba Haofeng was forced to take 3 steps back, and a hole the size of a bowl was created on the deck. The monarch of Xian Kingdom, Tuoba clan, was also a feudal lord who was conferred the title of Great Yan Dynasty. Naturally, Haoying clan had a close relationship with Tuoba clan. Slowly, Tuoba Haofeng raised the water-patterned turtle scale sword in his hand, which had been thoroughly tempered. On the blade of the sword, which was as clear as water and had a faint snowflake pattern, there was now a thumb-sized chip. However, this precious sword, which was strong enough to break a stone pillar, was turned into a scrap by Wuxia with just a mouthful of phlegm. The Celestial Music Palace was constructed with an extremely sturdy 1,000-years-old black teak wood, and its deck was half a foot thick. Not even an ordinary arrow could penetrate through it. Yet, Wuqi's phlegm had actually created a hole the size of a bowl on the deck. This was not something that an ordinary man could do. If not for the fact that Wuqi's innate water energy was extremely condensed, and its quality was comparable to a cultivator of breath condensation tier, how could his phlegm cause such a destructive force? Tuoba Haofeng cried out with a stern voice. "Wuqi, the hatred of killing my brother is absolutely irreconcilable. This is a sword talisman that I begged from heaven-breaking sword sect with all my belongings. Now die." After a brief moment of silence, Wuxia suddenly let out a long laugh. He pulled out his sword and pointed it at Tuoba Haofeng from a distance away. "Cut the crap. Let's fight to the death with our swords." Wuxia laughed mockingly. He cast a sideways glance at Tuoba Haofeng, and with a backhand swing of his sword, he forced Tuoba Haofeng to take a few steps back. At the same time he said in a strange tone, So that's what you're thinking. TSK, if that's the case, I'll have to become the guest of Princess Zhongli before I meet you." Right after the silver beam appeared, the huge prow of the Celestial Music Palace was instantly shredded into pieces by the endless sword intent. A blinding light enveloped the heaven and earth. From the talisman, a silver beam, as thick as a water bucket, shot whistling out like a long rainbow, piercing straight towards Wuqi's chest. Wuqi hastily took 2 steps back, dodging Tuoba Haofeng's sword attack. Then, he casually launched another 2 sword attacks and said with a cold smile, "Why did you do that? Tuoba Haofeng threw away the sword in his hand, which was smashed into pieces by Wu Qi's thick phlegm. Then he took over a spare longsword from one of his guards. He flicked the edge of the sword with his finger and said in a long voice, "O sword, O sword! Today, you're going to drink the blood from your enemy's neck. Elder brother, come here quickly. Watch me kill my enemy and avenge you. Poor you. You've tried your best to save me from danger, but you were killed by an ungrateful man like this. Haofeng hates, hates, hates." With a gloomy face, Lu Qingfeng came next to Wu Qi with his hands clasped behind his back. He lowered his head and looked down at Tuoba Haofeng, who was standing on the prow of the prow. "Who do you think you are? How dare you challenge my man? Tuoba Haofeng, remember your identity. You're just a prince born from a concubine of Xian Kingdom." Wu Qi laughed out loud and smashed the windowsill with his palm. He strode out from the windowsill and slowly landed on the prow of the pleasure boat. He looked up at the sky and sneered. "So that's how it is. Tuoba Haofeng, you want to kill me? You're giving Wu Qi a great deal of face. Good, good. Wu Qi is not someone who doesn't know what's good for him. My head is right here. Let's see if you have the sharp blade to chop it off." Chapter 82. A sword talisman was a unique technique of a human immortal of Jindan realm. It was a sword talisman made from rare natural materials, and sealed a sword energy of a human immortal of Jindan realm in it. Depending on the material and craftsmanship of the talisman, the power unleashed by a sword talisman was equal to 10 to 50% of a sword energy attack of a human immortal. Only a sword talisman made from a very high-grade talisman could unleash more than 50% of its power. The sword talisman in Tuoba Haofeng's hand was made from the spirit juice extracted from a 1,000-year-old green shell leaf and mixed with the skin of a 100-year-old golden toad. The quality of the material was not high, and the craftsmanship was ordinary. The body of the talisman was only of the lower grade. The power of the sword energy contained in the sword talisman was about 90% of a strike from a human immortal of Jindan realm, less than 10%. However, 90% of a full force strike from a human immortal of Jindan realm was equal to the full force strike from 10 embryonic breath realm Taoists of Xiantian realm. The bow of the Tianlu immortal palace, several tens of feet in circumference, was shattered into pieces. The sword energy blasted out a huge pit with a diameter of over 100 feet, reaching all the way to the bottom of the river. The sword energy spread in all directions. Countless hazy silver beams rolled and twisted in the river, killing countless fish nearby. Wu Qi's body was hovering in the middle of the surging silver sword energy. Both of his hands were placed on top of his head, and a blue light screen was flickering in his palms, blocking the attack of the sword energy. 4 upper-grade water elemental energy stones were hovering near his dantian, and an enormous amount of water elemental energy kept rushing into his body. Through his meridians, which were more than 10 times tougher than ordinary Taoists of Xiantian realm, they were quickly transformed into innate water energy, forming a layer of protective energy outside his body. The pressure on top of his head was like a mountain, and his whole body was being sliced by the sword energy. His skin could not withstand the attack of the sharp sword intent, and had already been torn apart, with large amounts of blood spraying out from under his skin. Wu Qi would have long been torn into pieces by the sword aura, if it were not for the fact that his innate water aura was sufficiently condensed, and that he was good at using softness to overcome hardness with softness, as well as using the vortex to wear down the sword aura shot out from the sword talisman. Fortunately, Princess Zhonglu had given Wu Qi 8 boxes of upper-grade water element energy stones, and fortunately, there was a special technique in Scroll of Stealing that could extract all the energy from the energy stones in an instant. If not, Wu Qi would have been smashed into a pulp by the sword talisman. Inch by inch, his body was pushed down to the bottom of the river by the sword energies. Wu Qi raised his head up, and through the blinding blue and silver light, he stared straight at Tuoba Haofeng, who had a hideous smile on his face, and a pleased expression on his face. Wu Qi remembered his smiling face and the dangerous situation he was in today. If not for his good luck, Tuoba Haofeng would have gotten what he wanted and killed him under the sword talisman. Sword talisman, Tuoba Haofeng had come prepared. He had prepared a sword talisman in advance. Letting out a long cry, for water element energy stones in front of Wuqi's dantian burst out with a blinding light at the same time, then turned into colorless powder and dissipated in the air. The surrounding water suddenly began to surge, and a huge amount of water vapor rolled and rolled, turning into a white mist and rushing into Wuqi's body. A watery cloud suddenly condensed under his feet. Wuqi forcefully exercised the special technique found in Chapter of Water and Scroll of Stealing, and his body began to emit a bone-piercing cold air. A stream of cold water vapor began to condense in Wuqi's lungs, and a strange goo-goo sound was coming out from his mouth, while a misty white light was faintly visible on the corner of his mouth. The water element energy contained in the energy stones and the water vapor that rushed into his body were compressed by Wuqi using a secret technique, and formed into a cold and sharp sword energy in his body. Fearing that the sword energy was not powerful enough, Wuqi clenched his teeth and pulled out the lower-tier flying sword from his storage ring, which he obtained from killing Aer in Little Meng City. He swallowed the short sword. His powerful divine sense quickly rushed into the flying sword, carving a faint spiritual mark on its body. After that, Wuqi's body shrunk inwardly. Using his body as a furnace, he forcefully compressed the sword energy and the flying sword into one. Tuoba Haofeng thought that Wuqi was going to die for sure. After all, this was a sword talisman personally crafted by a Jindan realm human immortal, and it was a treasure that he had spent a fortune and 4 beautiful girls to obtain. How could Wuqi, a mere meridian cultivating tier cultivator, escape from the sword talisman? Tuoba Haofeng threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh. Hot tears rolled down from the corner of his eyes. He let out a loud and wild cry and said, "Elder brother, your soul is not far away. Tuoba Haofeng will avenge you. Today, the blood feud has been avenged. Elder brother can die in peace now." The sword talisman shattered into pieces, and all the sword energy left in it had been completely drained. Tuoba Haofeng's body had lost the recoil force from the sword energy. As a warrior of peak Hotian realm, he didn't have the ability to float in the air. Thus, he made a slight turn and slowly landed on the deck. The river water, which was blasted by the sword energy, was rolling and rolling toward the center. The rumbling of the water waves was so loud that it could make one's eardrums hurt. A large amount of water vapor rolled and rose hundreds of feet up into the sky. Amidst the white water vapor, Wuqi was seen flying up into the sky with a miserable laugh. While letting out a strange laugh, Wuqi suddenly opened his mouth and shot out a 3 feet long white beam, shooting toward Tuoba Haofeng's heart along with a cold breeze. The white beam was extremely cold. Wherever it passed through, all the water vapor and water droplets were frozen into ice, and ice bullets fell down from the sky. Right after Tuoba Haofeng landed on the deck, he was about to greet those stupefied foppish young masters with a reserved smile on his face, announcing the victory of the duel to them. But all of a sudden, he saw a boundless shock and fear in the eyes of those foppish young masters and singing girls. His reaction was also extremely fast. He hurriedly let out a strange cry and his body suddenly leaned to the left. The white beam flashed and pierced into Tuoba Haofeng's heart from the back, coming out from his chest less than 2 inches away from his heart. A large amount of blood-red ice beads sprayed out from Tuoba Haofeng's chest. It was the blood brought out by the sword beam, but it was frozen into ice cubes by the frightening cold breeze that came from the sword beam. Tuoba Haofeng let out a miserable howl. He opened his mouth and sprayed out a stream of blood, but when the blood left his mouth, it immediately froze into a pillar of ice. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but a circle of white frost quickly spread from his chest to his entire body. In just a blink of an eye, he had been turned into an ice statue. The personal guards who accompanied Tuoba Haofeng let out a cry of terror. A few of them hastily rushed toward the frozen Tuoba Haofeng, while the others pulled out their swords and charged toward Wuqi. Wuqi's entire body was covered with blood. Although he managed to block the attack from the sword talisman by activating the energy stones, it was, after all, a sword talisman crafted by a human immortal expert of Jindan realm. Therefore, the supreme sword intent still managed to penetrate through his protective energy and hurt his body. At the moment, there were at least 40 to 50 wounds all over his body that looked like the mouth of a child. and blood was gushing out from them. Not to mention the external injuries, the sudden activation of the energy contained in 4 upper-grade water elemental energy stones was too much for Wuxi's meridians, which had been tempered and strengthened dozens of times. His meridians had already suffered from internal injuries, and the width of his meridians had been forcibly expanded by about 10 times. His once flexible and thick meridians were now as thin as a piece of paper, and were densely covered with countless cracks. All of his innate energy had been expelled along with the sword beam. Only a tiny bit of innate energy was still circulating within Wuxi's body, and it took him a great deal of effort to stand firmly on the bow of the ship and prevent himself from falling down. Right at this moment, a few personal guards of Tuoba Haofeng had drawn out their swords while roaring furiously, thrusting the tips of their swords towards the vital parts of his body. In just a blink of an eye, the swords had almost pierced into his body. Lu Chengfeng, who was standing on the highest floor of the banquet hall and watching the battle from the window, bellowed furiously, "How dare you? Wuqi has won the duel. Who dares to hurt my people? Luo Kadi Maliang, kill them all." 2 Xiantian warriors, Luo Kadi and Maliang, who were hiding among the crowd, let out a loud cry and dashed out. They were even faster than those personal guards who had drawn out their swords, and with just a leap, they arrived in front of Wuqi, who had lost all of his strength. 2 longswords flashed across, and all 5 personal guards of Tuoba Haofeng could only see a sword beam flashing in front of their eyes. Before they could even see the movement of these 2 men, their throats and chests were pierced by the swords, and they fell to the ground with blood spraying out from their mouths. Zhang Hu and Hu Wei, together with a few personal guards from Meng village, squeezed out from the crowd, took out their 9 cloud-piercing crossbows, and aimed them at the frozen Tuoba Haofeng and his personal guards. Zhang Hu gnashed his teeth and howled, "Fuck you. We brothers have won the duel. And you still want to bully us with your numbers? Damn it, brothers, come out. Let's see who has more people." Footsteps were heard coming from all directions, and from a few important spots on the pleasure boat of Tianlu Immortal Palace, figures of the hanger-ons and personal guards of Lu Chengfeng appeared. All of them were holding 9 cloud-piercing crossbows in their hands, staring at all the people on the pleasure boat with ferocious gazes. Standing next to Lu Chengfeng's hanger-ons and personal guards were a great number of scouting office men. They looked at these foppish young masters helplessly, then gestured at them, telling them to back off. Yen Buji had drowned in the Myriad Red River, and today, Lu Chengfeng had come to the Myriad Red River to enjoy himself. Therefore, how could he not have enough personal guards? 80% of the servants and serving ladies on the pleasure boat of Tianlu Immortal Palace were either the personal guards of Lu Chengfeng or the secret agents of Scouting Office. When they heard Zhang Hu's roar, they immediately showed up and took control of the situation. At least 309 cloud-piercing crossbows densely covered the entire pleasure boat, emanating a strong killing intent that spread in all directions. Among those foppish young masters on the scene, even those who were the boldest, the most arrogant, and the most despotic had their mouths tightly shut. Chuckling, Lu Chengfeng asked Wu Qi from afar, "Are you all right?" Wu Qi took a deep breath, fished out an innate water pill and swallowed it, slowly releasing a strong medicinal strength to nourish his entire body. Coughing out a mouthful of blood, Wu Qi let out a strange laugh and said, "I feel uncomfortable when I see that pretty boy standing next to you, so I'm not feeling well." Lu Chengfeng let out a loud laugh. Abruptly, he spun around like a whirlwind and gave the stunned Haoying Fenglong 18 slaps in a row. The slaps turned his handsome pretty boy's face green, red, purple, and green, as if someone had opened a dye house, and his face was swollen like a steamed bun. Kicking Haoying Fenglong away, Lu Chengfeng clapped his hands and said with a smile, "I've beaten you up today. If you don't like it, you can ask your Minister of Justice to come and talk to me. Damn it, how dare you provoke me and the people around me with words? Are you tired of living?" Seeing a Duke of Great Yen Dynasty cursing and beating a son of a noble clan in such a rude and vulgar manner, all the foppish young masters were struck dumb. However, Wu Qi let out a loud laugh and said, "Well done. Now I feel better. Hee Haoying Fenglong, if you have any resentment, you can ask your Minister of Justice to come and talk to your grandpa Wu Qi." Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng looked at each other and laughed out loud. Both of them glanced around, and all the foppish young masters on the boat bowed their heads. For a moment, they had a feeling that no one dared to go against them. Suddenly, a cold voice was heard coming from the river far away. The one laughing in front. Are you Wu Qi from Duke Yanli's mansion? I'm the current sect leader of heaven-breaking sword sect, Nie Baihong. I'm here to take you as my disciple. The laughter of Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng came to an abrupt stop. Chapter 83. After the duel, the sun had long disappeared into the horizon, and a bright moon rose slowly from the east, where the sky and the water met. Half of the myriad red river was green, and the other half red. Against the wavering shadow of the moon in the water, a lonely thought emerged out of thin air. A middle-aged man, no taller than 7 feet, clad in an ordinary burlap white robe, was walking slowly from the lower reaches of the river towards them with his hands clasped behind his back. He walked on the myriad red river, as if he was walking on flat ground. Wherever his bare feet passed, a 3-inch deep footprint would be left on the surface of the river. No matter how the river rolled and flowed, these footprints were clearly imprinted on the surface of the river, and did not dissipate even after a long time. Looking at the footprints on the surface of the river, Wu Qi had goosebumps all over his body. This was the unique sign of a cultivator of Jin Dan realm. When a cultivator formed the Jin Dan realm, he or she would step into the realm of human immortals, with 1 foot detached from the 5 elements and the realm of mortals. They stood on the dividing line between human immortals and human immortals. Half of them were human immortals, and the other half were immortals. In a human immortal of Jin Dan realm, the conflict between the great Tao of heaven and earth was very obvious, and the external signs were all kinds of unusual signs. Some immortals carried a strange fragrance, while some immortals were surrounded by colorful clouds. Wherever this white-robed man passed, his footprints would be left on the surface of the river, which was also a kind of unusual sign. This was a sign that could be seen with naked eyes, and Wu Qi's divine sense told him that this white-robed man, who was walking slowly from a few miles away, was emanating a sword intent that was as sharp as a cold wind in the winter, and as sharp as a well-tempered blade. Wherever he passed, the sword intent seemed to split the void. This was the unusual sign on the spiritual level of a human immortal of Jin Dan realm. Without sufficient cultivation base and soul force, no one could sense the sword intent emanating from his body. Step by step, Nie Baihong, the current sect leader of heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect, came to the deck of Heaven Music Immortal Palace. When his bare feet touched the deck, the footprints that stretched for several miles on the surface of the river behind him disappeared one after another. When the footprints spread out, the fishes, shrimps, turtles, red leaves, and petals in the river nearby were all crushed to pieces by the invisible sword energy. More than 30 young masters from influential clans rushed out from the crowd, and came before Nie Baihong in a disorderly manner. One after another, they dropped to their knees and kowtowed to Nie Baihong. Some of these young masters addressed Nie Baihong as sect master, some addressed him as grand master, and some even addressed him as supreme ancestor. The seniority of all these people was extremely diverse, and it caused Wu Qi to roll his eyes. Taking advantage of this chaotic situation, a few guards of Taba Haofeng hastily carried their master, who had been frozen into a block of ice, and stealthily sneaked off the pleasure boat. After that, they boarded the speedboat and quickly left the place. As Wu Qi was about to give the order to kill Tuoba Haofeng and his men, Nie Baihong suddenly gave him a look. A chill ran through Wu Qi's body, as if both his flesh and soul were slashed by a heavy sword. A buzzing sound kept ringing in his head, and he didn't come back to his senses for a long time. With just an indifferent glance, Wu Qi could tell that Chi-Chi's internal organs had suffered serious injuries. It was as if countless sharp blades were gently slicing through his internal organs, causing tiny cracks to appear on them, with blood oozing out bit by bit. He felt a sweet taste in his throat, as a mouthful of blood rolled up to his throat. Wu Qi took a deep breath and swallowed it back down. The reverse flow of blood had attacked his heart. Not only did Wu Qi spit out a mouthful of blood, he forcefully swallowed it back down. The innate energy in his body, which had just recovered a little, was thrown into chaos instantly, causing his internal injuries to worsen. His internal organs were shaken by the reverse flow of blood that he forcefully swallowed, and the cracks on his internal organs became even deeper. Eventually, Wuxia still couldn't control the injuries in his body, causing him to spit out 3 mouthfuls of blood in a row. The blood he spat out was bright red, bringing with it a pungent smell of blood. It seemed that his prime energy essence had been damaged, and his injuries were extremely serious. Fortunately, Wuxia had a strong foundation, and the amount of blood essence stored in his body was a few times greater than ordinary people. For ordinary people, these few mouthfuls of blood would require them to stay in bed for at least a few months, but he would only need a few days to recuperate. Coldly looking at the blood Wuxia spat out on the deck, Nie Baihong snorted lightly. Those young masters from influential clans who came forward to greet Nie Baihong rose to their feet hastily, holding their heads up high and lining up neatly according to their seniority in heaven-breaking sword sect. Nie Baihong nodded his head lightly. From the corner of his eyes, he gazed at Lu Chengfeng, who was standing by the window at the highest point of the banquet hall. Slowly he raised his hand and bowed to Lu Chengfeng, saying, "Greetings, Duke Yanle." Lu Chengfeng floated down and landed on the deck. He gave Wuxia a worried look, then hastily cupped his fist and bowed to Nie Baihong, saying, "Chengfeng offers greetings, sect leader. May I know what brings sect leader here today?" Indifferently, Nie Baihong gazed at Lu Chengfeng and said with a cold voice, "Just like what I said just now, I'm here to accept Wuxia as my disciple." Nie Baihong turned to look at Wuxia and said with a deep voice, "Among the 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty, the overall strength of heaven-breaking sword sect is ranked number 1, and my cultivation base is at the later stage of Jin Dan realm. Today, I'm here to accept you as my disciple, and this is your good fortune. Quickly come up here, and kowtow to me as your master. I don't want to stay in such a filthy place for too long." Before Nie Baihong could finish his words, a beautiful teenage girl, who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old, was irritated by the cold air contained in the sword beam unleashed by Wuxia just now. She felt an itch in her nose and suddenly sneezed. Nie Baihong's expression changed. He spun his head and glared at the teenage girl. A crisp sound of ripping rang out in the air, as the teenage girl's body was suddenly split into 2 from the middle. Her blood and flesh exploded and splattered on the floor of those people around her. A dead silence fell over the deck, especially those girls on the pleasure boats. Each of them had their hands tightly covering their mouths, and none of them dared to utter a single word. Among them, there were a few dancers who had a good relationship with the teenage girl. Although they were grief-stricken and frightened to death, they could only bite their own palms tightly and let big drops of tears fall from their eyes, not daring to make a single sound. Even these young masters from influential clans on the spot could kill them, and they could take away the lives of all the girls on this pleasure boat at any time, let alone Nie Baihong. He was the sect leader of an immortal sect, and these young masters from influential clans were just his juniors and apprentices. The life of a mere dancer was nothing in this situation. Abruptly, Lu Chengfeng clenched both his hands into fists. He gave Nie Baihong a quick glance, then slowly lowered his head. The dancer who was killed just now was not far away from him. A large amount of blood splashed onto Lu Chengfeng's soft brocade boots. Soaked in the blood, the green boots turned into a strange dark green color. Lu Chengfeng could feel the warm blood sticking to his feet, and it was slowly turning cold. Abruptly, Wuxia took a step forward. He looked at the dead body of the teenage girl, clenched his teeth and stared at Nie Baihong as he asked, "What crime did she commit?" As if he had just heard the most unbelievable joke in the world. Nie Baihong looked at Wuxia in astonishment and asked, "Do I need to convict her? She was disrespectful when I was speaking, and that is a capital crime. But why would you ask me such a question? Do I need an excuse to kill a lowly peasant?" Abruptly, the little bit of innate water energy left in Wuxia's water meridians was activated. But immediately, a severe pain came from his internal organs, which nearly made him faint. His internal organs were still bleeding. When he forcibly circulated his internal energy, it was like a juicer, as the pressure forced his internal organs to secrete more blood. Wu Qi's vision darkened, his body swayed, and he nearly fell to the ground. Suddenly, a bright smile emerged on his pale face. Blinking his eyes, Wu Qi looked at Nie Baihong with a gentle expression. Respectfully, he walked before Nie Baihong. Forcing himself to keep himself from fainting, Wu Qi dropped to his knees before Nie Baihong and gave him a few kowtows. Your disciple pays respect to master. It is my good fortune in my previous life to be able to receive guidance from master. What master said is absolutely right. For a lowly peasant like her, it doesn't matter if she dies. Indeed, she doesn't need to be charged with any crime. With a respectful and even slightly admiring smile on his face, Wu Qi stared at Nie Baihong with an innocent and naive look, whose expression had become very gentle. With a bright smile on his face he asked, "But I have no idea why master would come here and take me as your disciple? I've long heard about the reputation of heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect. But, even in my dreams, I never dared to dream that I could become your disciple." The flattery made Nie Baihong feel comfortable from the bottom of his heart. The fact that he had just killed a dancer was like a drop of water sliding across an ice-cold diamond, leaving no trace in his heart. Looking at Wu Qi, whose face was filled with a smile, and whose eyes were filled with admiration, respect, and awe, Nie Baihong nodded satisfyingly. "Well, this is your good fortune. If not for Princess Zhonglu personally sending someone to beg me, I wouldn't have made an exception and accepted you as my disciple." Princess Zhonglu had actually sent someone to beg Nie Baihong to accept Wu Qi as his disciple? Wu Qi's heart trembled. Once again he owed Princess Zhonglu a favor. But, never in his wildest dreams did he expect that the master that Princess Zhonglu had found for him out of kindness was actually someone like Nie Baihong. The moment they met, he had given Wu Qi a show of strength, nearly shattering his internal organs. Furthermore, he had secretly protected Tuoba Haofeng, allowing Tuoba Haofeng to escape smoothly. Then, he had even killed an innocent girl right in front of Wu Qi because of a trivial matter. It was better not to have such a master. However, facing the formidable sword energy emanating from Nie Baihong's body, Wu Qi's smile became even more amiable and adorable. Then he kowtowed to Nie Baihong and said smilingly, "So it's Princess Zhongli's kindness. Disciple finally understands now. Thank you, master, for coming here personally. Even if I have to sacrifice myself and break all my bones, I won't be able to repay your kindness." Nie Baihong felt more and more satisfied. Wu Qi's flattery had made him feel very comfortable. After all, which young master from those influential clans would say such flattering words to Wu Qi? Finally, a trace of a smile was squeezed out from Nie Baihong's stiff face. Slowly, he fished out a long sword from his storage ring and casually handed it over to Wu Qi. "Well, from today onwards, you're a disciple of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, one of my direct disciples. From now on, you'll come to Mount White Sun for a lecture at the beginning of every month. During the rest of the time, you're free to do whatever you want. I'll give you this sword. Take good care of it." Patting on Wu Qi's shoulder, Nie Baihong threw a thin palm-sized book called Qi Circulating Technique of 5 Elements to Wu Qi. After that, he spun around and flew away. He walked quickly on the surface of the river, leaving a trail of footprints on the surface of the river. Very soon, he disappeared into the distance. Nie Baihong's voice was heard coming from afar. "The Qi Circulating Technique of 5 Elements is the foundation of our sect's sword technique. Cultivate it diligently, and don't slack off. Anyone who secretly teaches it to an outsider will be killed without mercy. Anyone who covets the secret technique will have his entire clan executed. You must remember this." Reverently, Wu Qi picked up the thin book, bowed towards the direction where Nie Baihong had left. When he bowed, Wu Qi's eyes suddenly turned bloodshot, and his face was filled with a ferocious expression. When he straightened his back, his face was once again wearing the smile of a spring breeze. Chapter 84. On the small lake in the backyard of Duke Yanli's mansion, Wu Qi was lying quietly in a small boat. He had memorized the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements by heart, liver, lung, spleen, and kidney, and had begun his preliminary cultivation. Using the heart, liver, lungs, spleen, and kidney as the core, 5 vast streams of energy were flowing through Wu Qi's 8 extraordinary meridians and 12 principal meridians. The Qi circulating technique of 5 elements was the most traditional method of laying the foundation for a cultivator. It was to refine the essence of the blood and flesh into the innate energy, nurture the 5 internal organs, give birth to the 5 elements, and nurture the innate energy of 5 elements, strengthening the innate foundation of cultivating the Tao hidden in the 5 internal organs. With the innate energy of 5 elements, the innate spirit seed would grow into spirit sprout and spirit root, laying the foundation for the Tao of immortals. If it were some other warriors of Xiantian realm who wanted to cultivate the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements, they would have to change the circulation route of the innate energy in their meridians, and this would be a huge trouble. For warriors who could cultivate to the realm of Xiantian realm, the circulation route of the innate energy in their meridians had already formed a fixed pattern, and had even fused with their blood and spirit. If they wanted to change the circulation route of the innate energy, it would be like trying to change the track of a speeding train, and it would be extremely difficult. Therefore, ordinary immortal sects were only willing to accept disciples who did not cultivate. Warriors of peak stage Hotian realm were already the limit. For a warrior like Wu Qi who had stepped into the realm of Xiantian realm, if not because of Princess Zhongli's great influence, it would be impossible for Nie Baihong to accept him as a disciple. Putting everything else aside, if a warrior of Xiantian realm wanted to cultivate the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements, it would take him at least 3 to 5 years of hard work. That was the reason why Nie Baihong left a cultivation manual to Wu Qi casually, as he didn't think highly of Wu Qi's future in cultivation. He was just giving face to Princess Zhonglo, and that was why he came to accept Wu Qi as his disciple. As for whether Wu Qi could achieve any results in his cultivation, it had nothing to do with him. But for Wu Qi, it was not a problem at all. The technique he was cultivating came from the scroll of stealing, and the core meridians he cultivated were the 7 stealing heaven meridians in both of his arms. As for the 8 extraordinary meridians and 12 standard meridians in his body, they were completely empty, without any innate energy left in them. He only needed to follow the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements to absorb a bit of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and use his spiritual sense, which was several times more powerful than an ordinary person's, to guide the spiritual energy to circulate in his meridians for 36 cycles, thus laying a solid foundation for the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements. The meridians in Wu Qi's body were unobstructed, and the width and strength of his meridians were dozens of times that of an ordinary person. In just a few days of cultivation, his cultivation of the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements had reached the level of 30 years, and he had achieved a preliminary balance of the minor 5 elements in his 5 viscera. With the nourishment of the genuine Qi of 5 elements, Wu Qi could clearly sense that there was a vigorous vitality growing in his internal organs with his soul sense. As long as his cultivation of the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements broke through to the Xiantian realm, he would be able to nurture the spirit sprouts and spirit roots in his 5 viscera, which were brought about by his innate spirit seed, that would lay the foundation for him to pursue the Tao of immortality. However, to be honest, in Wu Qi's opinion, although the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements could allow one to reach the peak stage of Xiantian realm, it was too crude and shallow. No matter it was the quality of the cultivated innate energy, the speed of accumulating innate energy, or the effect of nurturing and nourishing the 5 viscera, they were all very weak. Compared to the techniques found in the Source of Water chapter, the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements was just trash, the kind of trash that had been soaked in the latrine for several dozens of years. So, this is the basic Qi cultivating technique that Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect is so proud of. He laughed mockingly, casually shoving the small booklet into his storage ring. After that, Wu Qi took out the longsword given to him by Nie Baihong. The longsword had a pale green hue, and its blade looked like a ripple of water. It was bright and dazzling, and gave off a sharp feeling when looking at it. The length of the longsword was 3 feet and 6 inches, and it could be considered as a big and sturdy fellow among all the flying swords. Compared to the ordinary flying swords, which were only 3 to 5 inches long and 1 foot long, It was really huge. However, although the flying sword was huge, it was still a lower-grade magical item. It was no different from the few small flying swords in Wuxi's hands. It was made from an ordinary 100-years-old dark steel mixed with a little bit of dark copper from the bottom of the ocean, and its quality could not be considered as good. As for the formations engraved on its blade, they were the wood element sky sweeping array, and the grand white gunmetal iron slashing array, which were the most common lower-grade magical items. Of course, due to the huge size of the sword, there were 12 sky-sweeping arrays engraved on its blade, which were 9 more than the ordinary lower-grade magical flying swords, and 6 iron slashing arrays, which were 3 more than the ordinary lower-grade magical flying swords. Therefore, once this flying sword was unleashed, its speed would be 30% faster than the ordinary lower-grade flying swords, and its sharpness would be at least 50% higher. However, such a little improvement in its attributes could not change the fact that this flying sword was just a lower-grade magical item. If Wuxi's cultivation base was strong enough to produce the Samadhi true flame in his body, he could use his divine sense to carve formations on the flying sword. Then, with the knowledge he obtained from Scroll of Stealing, he could carve 108 higher-grade formations on the body of this huge flying sword. With that, he could at least forcibly upgrade this flying sword to the level of an upper-grade magical item. Using a mere lower-grade flying sword as a favor? Do you think I've never seen anything good? Narrowing his eyes, Wuxi tried to recall the vast amount of formations and methods used to craft various magical treasures and spirit items when he inherited the Scroll of Stealing. He could not help but let out a faint sigh. The Samadhi True Flame was an ability that only human immortals could possess. Carefully, Wuxi raised up the sword edge and gently licked it with the tip of his tongue. After that, he sprayed a mouthful of blood essence onto the sword edge, branding a thread of divine sense into this flying sword named Autumn Water. Then he performed a profound sword incantation gesture and pointed at the flying sword. A sword cry rang out, and the flying sword soared up into the sky, leaving behind a short cold beam as it flew up into the sky, circling 3 times above Wuxi's head. For a cultivator of the Meridian cultivating tier, it was considered pretty good that his flying sword could soar into the sky. With the strength of Wuxi's soul, which was a few times stronger than the others, the fact that the flying sword could fly and pierce through the air within a radius of 200 feet around him showed that it possessed a certain level of combat strength. At first glance, he could be considered as a qualified sword immortal. Behind the chi circulating technique of 5 elements, there were 3 most basic sword incantations, and the most basic sword techniques of thrusting, spinning, and slashing. However, Wuxi did not pay any attention to these trivial sword incantations and sword techniques. What he was using now was a sword technique inherited from Scroll of Stealing, which was far more advanced than the sword incantation of chi circulating technique of 5 elements. After wielding the flying sword for a while, he kept the Autumn Water sword back into his storage ring. After that, Wuxi swallowed an innate water pill, and with the power of the pill, he strengthened the innate energy cultivated by the chi circulating technique of 5 elements by 30%. After that, he closed his eyes and began to snore contentedly. In the pavilion next to the lake, Lu Chengfeng, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked enviously at the cold beam left behind by Wuxi's flying sword in the sky. He breathed out a faint sigh. Carefully, he took out a few pieces of earth element materials from his storage bag, then slowly burned them with the little 25th lamp. He began to think if he should use his connections to find an immortal sect and join it. However, among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yin Dynasty, which one of them was an expert in the art of formations? Therefore, Lu Chengfeng decided to find out more about them. A few days had passed, and it was the first day of the month. Wuxi suddenly recalled what Nie Baihong told him, that he had to go to Mount White Sun and listen to the lecture of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect on the first day of every month. Currently, Lu Chengfeng was carrying out all the tasks in his hands in an orderly manner, and it wouldn't make a difference whether Wuxi was there or not. Therefore, Wuxi simply asked for a day's leave from Lu Chengfeng, borrowed a guide from Yan Bugui, and began his journey towards Mount White Sun outside Ji City. The area of several tens of thousands of miles outside Ji City was filled with flatlands and hills, and only a few beautiful mountains could be seen. In this world where mountain ranges stretched for several tens of thousands of miles, these mountains outside G City could only be described as small pebbles. They were really inconspicuous. However, as the saying goes, the height of a mountain doesn't matter if it's an immortal. 270 miles to the south of G City, Mount White Sun, the tallest mountain was only 3,000 feet tall, and its circumference was only about 100 miles. It could be considered as one of the famous blessed lands of Great Yin Dynasty. 600 years ago, the founding ancestral master of heaven-breaking sword sect, Nye Yaonu, was lucky enough to encounter an immortal's fate in Mount White Sunday. She entered a cave left behind by an immortal, inherited the legacy of that immortal, and founded heaven-breaking sword sect. Although it was founded less than 600 years ago, heaven-breaking sword sect had caught up from behind. Relying on its formidable overall strength, it had firmly occupied the position as the #1 immortal sect among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yin Dynasty. Mount White Sun used to be a place where the rich and idle people of Great Yin Dynasty would go for an outing. But since Nye Yaonu founded heaven-breaking sword sect here, it had become the headquarters of heaven-breaking sword sect. Today, Mount White Sun was shrouded in a layer of white mist, and a defensive formation had tightly covered the mountain range of 100 miles in circumference. Led by the guide, Wuxia rode on a single horned deer and came to the front of Mount White Sunday. There was a rugged path paved with stone slabs, and a simple and crude archway made of pure wood. This was the location of the headquarters of heaven-breaking sword sect. Amidst the white mist, 4 young men clad in white robes, their faces filled with arrogance, were seen sitting on a long bench under the archway, their legs crossed and chatting with each other. Because of the barrier of the formation, the voices of these men couldn't be heard. Therefore, Wuxia had no idea what they were talking about. But by looking at the strange smile on their faces, which any man would understand, Wuxia knew that they were not talking about some pure and innocent business. He coughed and leaped off the mount. Wuxia came before the archway, cupped his fist and bowed to the 4 young men standing several tens of feet away from him through the defensive formation. Fellow disciples, I Wuxia, offer my greetings. Please do me a favor, as Wuxia is here to listen to the lecture. The few young men were taken aback. Chi rose to his feet, fixing his eyes on Wuxia. One of them raised a jade medallion and waved it in front of Wuxia. The cloud in front of Wuxia blinked and blinked, opening up a wide path. 4 young men in white robes walked out from the formation, giving Wuxia a scrutinizing glance from top to bottom. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, the young man who activated the formation sneered at Wuxia and said, "So you're Wuxia? The hanger-on of Duke Yanli's mansion, Wuxia? So you're the one who killed Taba Qingye and wounded Tuoba Haofeng?" Upon hearing this, Wuxia knew that this man did not speak in a friendly tone. He smiled reservedly, nodded his head and said, "Yes, I am Wuxia. However, between Taba Qingye and Tuoba Haofeng, one was killed, and the other was wounded. It was Wuxia who had no other choice." The young man stretched out his hand hastily and stopped Wuxia from continuing. He sneered and said, "Don't bother explaining, we won't listen to you. And you don't have the right to ask us to listen to your explanation. Whether Taba Qingye and Tuoba Haofeng are dead or alive has nothing to do with us. But, aren't you the one who wounded Haoying Fenglong?" Wuxia was struck dumb again. They knew Haoying Fenglong? The one who wounded Haoying Fenglong was Lu Qingfeng. But with the friendship between Wuxia and Lu Qingfeng, would it make any difference who wounded Haoying Fenglong? Chuckling, Wuxia nodded his head and said, "The one who wounded Haoying Fenglong is Wuxia. May I ask, what advice do you have for me?" The 4 young men in white robes exchanged a glance, then sneered together. Clanging noises of swords rang out, as 4 flying swords flew up into the sky from Chi. Grinning coldly, the 4 young men said, "If you want to enter the mountain and listen to the lecture, you'll have to defeat us." Not allowing Wuxia to say anything, the 4 flying swords thrust towards him at the same time. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.